Howdy. I'm actually not going to waste 5 minutes or 10 minutes of your time until we find out if this thing is working. Can somebody let me know if you have sound? And that takes a while for the chats to come in. Howdy. Welcome back to Dion Talk. Oh, great. We have sound this time. This is technically round 3. And I have a $3,000 paperweight here. Get a new computer and I'm having nothing but problems with it. So we are on a 10-year-old $500 laptop. So I'm surprised it's working. I will try to keep the frustration out of my voice. I'm traveling. I'm in Florida for a month or two. Normally I am in Washington, and I'm either at work or I'm at home where I have everything set up and everything just works. But that's not the case today. So I'm sorry for it being a half an hour late. I'm going to talk for a few minutes to give people a chance to find this video, since it's not the original link that went out on a couple of events that I made today, because I learned how to make those. But that'll give us a few minutes for people to get their questions into the comments. But I want to cover the topic of this video first. And I have, of course, friends calling me and saying, "Hey, your sound is working." Well, leave a message, the guy calling me. Something I hear a lot of new investors talk about is when they have a rental, they're afraid that their expenses impact their cash flow. So what I'll hear people say often is, if I have a rental and it only cash flows $100 a month, and then I have $1,000 water heater break, then I'm going to lose 10 months of cash flow. And that's the way a lot of investors look at it until they figure out how the math actually works. First, as an investor, you should have reserves. So the money's not coming out of your account that you're going to spend to live on. And reserves change based on the size of your portfolio. When I first started, I had 7 or less units. I kept $10,000 in an account as a reserve. That could basically handle a few months with people not paying rent, or it could replace a roof or a couple water heaters. As my portfolio grew, Murphy's Law can kick in. If anything can go wrong, it probably will. But Murphy's fourth corollary is, if a sequence of events can go wrong, they probably will, and in the worst possible order. So as my portfolio grew, I grew the cash in the reserves. The $10,000 wouldn't be enough if a few things went bad, or if we had a pandemic and all of a sudden everybody decided they didn't have to pay rent. So I increased the reserves up to $30,000. I've still never actually touched those reserves for repairs. When you have a water heater that breaks, it can come out of your reserves. That's the money you use when you don't have the money to fix it out of your cash accounts. When we run the numbers to buy a property, we think of basically 3 things: price of the property, the rates we're going to get on the property, and the rents, to make a calculation to get what is considered your cash on cash return. When people are calculating their cash on cash return, that's when they find out things like, they say, I cash flow $100 per door, which I hear a lot of people talk about $100 or $200 per door because they're in BiggerPockets, and they hear people talk about the BRRRR method, where you buy a property, rehab it, rent it out, refinance, repeat, and they're recycling the capital, where $100 or $200 a month in cash flow seems like a lot if you have no money invested in that property. And that's not what I do. I save up a down payment and I buy the property. In the beginning, this went really slow. It took about 2 years between that first and second rental. And then later, as you get more cash flowing assets and the income snowball starts to build up, you purchase quicker. But with down payments and not recycling cash flow, I'm averaging about $630 per door in cash flow. So if you do the math, then if I had $1,000 expense on a water heater, people would say, well, if you have $600 a month in cash flow, that's almost 2 months of cash flow you're using to replace that water heater. And again, that's the newer investor who hasn't learned the math on how math works. When we're calculating our yield, you have a cost to acquire and you have annual profit. Annual profit is the money left on your gross rents after you take out principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, after you set aside for repairs, maintenance, vacancy, and if you have property management, property management. Hotel staff. What time is it? Why would they be? Okay. I'm going to try to make sure that traveling doesn't interfere with all of the live streams that I do for the next month or two. Quick segue. Normally, I live in Washington State, where I work full-time running a trucking company, truck driving school, and I run a nonprofit that does job placement assistance, and I work in YouTube probably about 30 hours a week. And then I self-manage 16 rental units. So sometimes I feel a little bit busy. Once in a while, I'll take a trip. 2018, month in Colombia. 2019, month in Thailand. 2020, pandemic. 2021, month with my brothers driving all over the country. 2022, I'm still going to plan a trip somewhere, but for the next month or two, I'm going to scuba in Florida until I get bored. And I'm not sure if it's going to take a month or two. So whenever that's over, I'll be back in Washington. So this is the first live stream done that was supposed to be in a VRBO. That story will come up later in this. I'm not in the VRBO. I'm in a hotel dealing with a lot of technical issues. So that's not how it works. If I spend $1,000 on a water heater, I'm not using up 2 months worth of $600 a month cash flow. In my calculations, when I buy a property, I set aside 10% for maintenance and repairs, 5% for vacancy. And if you have property management, you're going to want to set aside for that. But since I self-manage, I don't set aside any. It only takes about 2 hours a month to self-manage 16 rental units. For me, that wouldn't justify the over $20,000 I would have paid to a property manager last year if I had zero tenant turnover. So I'm still self-managing, even though I don't set money aside for it. That 10% of gross rents and 5% for vacancy, that money is being set aside to take care of repairs and maintenance. So when you have a problem with a water heater, or you have a broken window, or you have a key that needs replaced, those expenses are paid from the cash flow that's going into your repairs and maintenance account, not the cash flow that's going into your profit account. It's not a part of your yield. Remember, yield is annual profit divided by cost to acquire. Annual profit is money left over after principal, interest, taxes, insurance, repairs, maintenance, and vacancy. What's left is profit times that month times 12 to get you your annual profit divided by cost to acquire. Cost to acquire is down payment, immediate repairs, and closing costs. So the money spent to make the place rent ready when you purchased it. Your yield doesn't include a calculation for maintenance and repairs because that's the money also being set aside out of gross rents. When we first start out, it seems like if you have $1,000 water heater, you have to pay to replace it because maybe you haven't built up the reserves yet. So that money would come out of reserves if you don't have it. As you build the reserve account, and again, this scales in size with the size of your portfolio, the more properties you have, the larger your reserves are going to be. I've never in a year, even in a year where I replaced a roof, have I spent more than 10% of gross rents. On that first property, gross rents might not be a lot. And if you don't have the reserves built up, again, it feels like you are paying for maintenance and repairs. But as the income snowball kicks in, as the number of units increases, as that cash flow increases, gross cash flow, not just the profit, but that 10% for repairs and maintenance and 5% for vacancy that you're setting aside for that gets bigger with each property as well. When the reserve account is full, when there's $30,000 in there right now with my 16 units, that doesn't mean that now that 15% of gross rents that I would be setting aside goes to my spending fund. Like I can get a bigger car, better vacation, spend 3 months in Florida scuba diving instead of 1 or 2 months. But that money goes to the investing fund. So when the reserve account is full, investing happens faster because all of the money that we all would be setting aside for repairs, maintenance, and vacancy is going into the investing fund. When we have an expense, it can come out of the investing fund, it can come out of the reserves, whatever you're most comfortable with, but it's not coming out of your cash flow. If you buy a cash flow negative property, that means you're not setting aside for repair, maintenance, and vacancy. A question we had come up, I think, a week or two ago, and we talked about it in the Three Amigos with Matt the Lumberjack Landlord and Michael Zuber from One Rental at a Time, talking about somebody thinking it's okay to buy an alligator, a property that loses a little bit of money every month, because in the last year, it appreciated 20%, or $20,000 was the appreciation that they were running, which means they were anticipating that same growth next year, which to me is a really risky thing. Then expenses even make that a worse deal. But when you buy a property right, where you figure out what the area average yield for your area is, and that can be 5%, 8%, 15%, whatever your area average is, our goal should be to buy a property that is getting better than that area average yield. If we pay principal, interest, taxes, insurance, and we set aside for repairs, maintenance, and vacancy, those funds are what protects your cash flow. Your cash flow is what protects your asset. This is something I heard them come up with on a BiggerPockets episode with Meet Kevin. Meet Kevin was being interviewed, and it seemed like in the middle of the interview, Brandon Turner, David Green, and Meet Kevin Paffrath, had the thought at the same moment. It looked like Kevin reached around for a notepad to take a note, that your cash flow protects your asset. Because if you're buying properties that have positive cash flow, when we have a recession or a property correction or crash and prices go down, it doesn't impact you. The only thing that really impacts us as buy and hold investors is a reduction in rents, which in my life I have not seen. So even in 2008, when the recession hit, when the housing crash happened, 2009 and 10, rents went up in most areas because a lot of people that had their houses go through foreclosure, and literally millions of people had houses go through foreclosure, became renters, increasing demand on rentals. So if you have increased demand, same supply, you're going to have rent increases. I'm not concerned about a property price or crash or correction coming up in the next few years. I have a plan for either. If prices go up, I have a strategy. If prices go down, I have a strategy. If they stay the same, I have a strategy. My goal was to get rental properties and then not worry about what I owe on them and not worry about what happens to their price. I actually didn't know that my net worth hit over $1 million until I did a video that's on this channel called something like, which came first, $1 million in net worth or $1 million in debt? I only found out I had $1 million net worth because I was doing the video on net worth, because that's not a number that really matters to us as an investor. Okay, so we've had technical issues. I've covered the topic of how rental expenses do not impact cash flow, because the money we set aside for repairs, maintenance, and vacancy handles those repairs. I'm actually at the point in my investing where I look forward to calls. I had a tenant call me probably 2 or 3 months ago, and she said, your garage door, because she's the tenant, I'm the owner, it's my garage door, is falling apart. It was the original garage door from, I think, 1982. And it was a wooden one that didn't articulate in the middle. It actually folded. It's the original garage door. So I'm surprised it lasted as long as it did. I spent, I think it was around $2,000 plus a tip to put a new garage door in, which is more expensive than a couple of years ago. So you would think I'm an investor, and an investor would go, oh man, $2,000 expense to put in a garage door, that must suck. And I'm like, oh, that's great. The asset looks better. The tenant is happy. I've protected the garage longer, and it was the tenant's money that paid for the repair. It wasn't mine. It was the cash flow that I'm setting aside for repairs, maintenance, and vacancy that covered that upgrade. So when things like expenses and rental properties come up in the first couple of years of investing, it's a stressor. Now, I look forward to employing contractors and handymen, because on jobs that, garage door might not really be an emergency, tenant wasn't parking in there, it just wasn't working right. But now I have a contractor for all my other garage doors when I do have an emergency. When I have a plumbing issue and I call my handyman and they replace old, I want to say cast iron, but that's not what it is, old pipes with new PEX pipes, I'm protecting an asset. I look forward, this is the right way for me to think about it. I look forward to spending the tenant's money repairing or upgrading my properties, because then it's an asset that I get to keep. Instead of looking at it like anytime there's an issue, I lose money. I hope that helps make you helps you understand one of the ways we can invest and take out some of the stress. So I'm going to go to the top. I'm going to say all the howdies, get through all the questions. I do have one question that somebody texted me to give me a little bit of time to think about in advance, which I appreciate. Which was it's a good question because it's something I looked into about a year ago, and I think I have some good information for her. So first, thank you everybody who went to my first couple of live streams when I resisted the urge to take the $3,000 Mac paperweight and put it through the window and then have to find another place to be, even though I'm in my third place to stay here in Florida already. So CJ, howdy, round two. Um, Larry, round three, must be, howdy, Larry, must be hanging cowboy hat in Idaho or something, close, Florida, out of Washington. Tom, howdy, and thanks for calling me Tom. It's going to be a good one. Hi, and everyone. I'm a Fid. Howdy. I'm on the hunt for numero tres. Howdy. Cool. Tom, Dion question. What would it take for you to invest at a distance? So I was looking at house hacking at a distance because we were putting in campuses in other states. We were looking at Arizona and then we settled on Idaho. So I was looking at both of those locations when we were doing it. I'm currently looking in Washington. I liked Idaho, but I got to spend some time there in the winter, and it happened to be the worst winter out of the last decade. And I'm a desert rat, grew up in Southern California. I don't mind the cold. It gets cold in the desert, but that is a frozen tundra for like 2 months out of the year. So I don't know that I'm going to buy in Idaho. I'm actually a pretty big fan, I think is the right word, of Millennial Mike. He has a YouTube channel and he lives in Washington. He's a state trooper. I think he's been doing that for like 6 years. But he invests at a distance. And his friend that got him into investing in distance, his name is Mark from Matsky Finance. Matsky Finance also has a YouTube channel. It's weird how the world just kind of connects us. But Mark lives here in Cape Coral, where I'm going to be for a month or two. So I'm hoping to hook up with Mark here for lunch for exchange ideas, because they both invest at a distance. I like currently hands-on. I have really good luck with the binder strategy. I haven't taught a property management company how to get the tenants to request a rent increase. I could probably get a better return if I copied what they're doing. So if you're looking for information and investing at a distance, I would go to Millennial Mike and Mark Matsky's. It's Matsky Finance here on YouTube. Check out their content. They talk about how to do that. I think they're in Indiana or Indiana or some place like that where they invest. But Mark is in Florida and Millennial Mike is in Washington. So it's entirely possible, but I'm still a bit of a control freak and I like house hacking. So that's going to be where I stay. And I don't actually plan on adding too many more properties. It's probably a video that I should make on why I don't want hundreds of units. And don't get me wrong, Lumberjack Landlord and Michael Zuber and guys that have 100, 200 units, they're killing it. They're doing great. But my goal is financial freedom, not have to work, and then to enjoy life. And I don't know that comes from more units. I think it comes from a bell curve. Too few units wouldn't give enough cash flow. Too many units would take more management and more effort, where there's this bell curve sweet spot in the middle of probably 10 properties, 25 to 30 units, self-managed with systems in place. I think that's kind of the spot I'm going for. Yeah. So that's what it would take for me to do long distance, Tom. Yes. Thank you. Sound is on. Matt Higgins, howdy. Dawn, howdy. All good. Again, to everybody, I apologize for that fiasco. Tony, howdy. Matt Higgins, we got audio. Yay. Chester, howdy. Pomegranate vodka is too, I take it. I don't have any alcohol here. It's going to be a rough trip. Tony, don't sweat it. Don, howdy. And group, Northwest Coast, howdy. No worries whenever you are ready to go. Yeah. Phil, howdy. Yahoo or yippee-ki-yay. I am definitely a fan of Bruce. Tom, where would you consider investing other than near driving school locations? Yeah, I'm probably going to go to Millennial Mike and Mark Matsky and pick their brains on. I do have a video where I talked about how I would pick a market, and there are several things I would look at: migration patterns, population growth. Go to U-Haul, figure out where all their trucks are going. I want places that are increasing in population density. Um, but there's some really weird things to look at too. So I drove around Florida today. Well, not Florida, but I drove around Cape Coral in Florida today for about 6 hours, just looking at neighborhoods. And there's a few reasons why I don't think I would want to invest in Florida. One thing is the flood insurance based on the elevation of your property. The second is I did not drive on one street that didn't have empty buildings. There's a lot of residential building, and we're seeing a shift from people being able to work at a distance. But the surrounding areas here looks like the city is either growing or dying at the same time. And so I don't know that I would look at how the economics of an area are doing as well as the population growth. I want a lot of economic drivers. I want things like a base, a port, a college, a hospital, several sources of tenants in case something happens where one or two things can happen and I still don't lose all my tenants. It would definitely take some research. Chester, cash flow is net, clear after all expenses. It may be a multi-step equation starting from rent, revenue, but it's still only one big subtraction equation. It is. But you'd be surprised, Chester, on how many investors I see in the real estate rookie group or on the BiggerPockets forums that literally talk about an expense taking X number of months of their cash flow, which meant they had no money outside of cash flow being set aside for those problems. And you'd recommend including a property management fee as a just in case. So the reason I haven't really worried about a property management fee is one of the actual reasons I invest in real estate. When I purchase a property, my goal in my area, I was able to find 7 or 8% returns without too much difficulty. One out of every 10 to 15 deals would be that. So I would look for 10% yields, and I would get one out of a little more than 20 would do that. So I would make an offer, make dozens of offers to find one that would work or get accepted. But that 10% is year one. I can manage a property for a year, pretty much no matter what happens. Year two, year three, the average is over 20%. Rents go up, expenses stay the same, or they go up a little bit. And then we had a pandemic in 2020, 2021, where rents skyrocketed. My mortgage is actually, 4 of them stayed the same. 2 of them went down significantly because I refinanced to a better rate. The money that I would need for property management happens over a couple of years with rent increases and mortgages staying pretty much the same. So it's worked in there, and that's why I haven't worried about it. Tom, glad to see you're not the only ones with issues. Julie, howdy. Thanks. And I will, since you're there, I'm going to go to your question and I'm going to read it. And if anybody isn't aware, I think I say this every now and then in my live streams. I read every comment, I read every question, because I know that in Futureland, somebody's going to watch this in the background with the app closed and they can't see those kind of things. So let me find the question. I have a question for tonight. I wanted to give you a chance to, okay, I would love to own 5 to 10 acres for the future. Here's my question. If I bought a property with 5 acres and a rentable or near rentable house or mobile on it, would I be able to advertise it to truckers who could then park their rigs on it? Would the city or county allow that? And would that be something independent truckers would consider higher value to rent? And if so, how much value could that add to a monthly rent? Thinking outside the box here. So you are thinking outside the box. It's actually a really good thought process. And a lot of people who work in transportation had a very similar thought a year or two ago when they changed the hours of service regulations. There was a period of time where it was a lot easier for drivers to have 2 extra hours during inclement weather and to be able to drive to a certain a certain distance to find a safe haven. Well, a lot of the regulations changed a couple of years ago, making it a lot harder for drivers. And we have ELD laws where there's electronic devices and computer in the trucks now that EOLD, however they say that. It's basically, instead of paper logs, we have Qualcomm's or something that tracks it electronically. So drivers have to stop. So a lot of places along the road, people would think of buying 4 or 5 acres and turning it into a place where trucks can stop, because we need the truck drivers on the road. There's literally nothing in your house that didn't probably come from a truck driver. And we made regulations to protect the public, to stop drivers from driving while they're fatigued. I understand. But the driver needs to find a place to park. So if we have more places for trucks to park, transportation is a lot easier time. There are parking lots, literally parking lots and truck stops where trucks can park and they pay for a slot, or places where trucks can park for free. But it's really hard. So having a truck, a spot where your trucks would be close to terminal hubs, but not right at them, because if they're at the hubs, they can park at the hubs usually. So you wouldn't want it in an industrial area. So if you're talking 5 acres further out, the problem you're going to run into is most municipalities have regulations on vehicles parking in their yards because of the oil drip off that trucks are going to have. So that could be a certain amount of paving, a certain amount of gravel. We had one location for our truck driving school where for every number of parking spots we put in, we had to put in so many trees on the property. So there's some regulations in cities, but if you get outside of city limits, counties are a little more relaxed about that. We have 5 trucking campuses. 3 of them are inside city limits, and we deal with a lot more regulations. So if you can get outside of there's a huge difference. The problem you're going to run into is the percentage that the ground is compacted at. That you need to be at 80% or higher, almost road grade level, in order for trucks to be able to park there. Especially, Julie, you live in Washington. It's probably the 3rd wettest state on the planet, right? The ground is often wet. So you're talking compacting, shale, 5/8 minus, some form of keeping it graded. So having a tractor. So it's not something that I would do if my plan was to do 1 5-acre parcel. But if you were going to do it as a business where you got really good at finding the places where trucks are going to go, where they're going to need to stop, it's something to consider. Depending on visibility of your property, you might have better luck renting parking spaces to trucking companies where they park a trailer, where the side of the trailer is their banner. So it's like putting up a billboard, but you don't have to pay the billboard fee. So I would look into specifically, go to your municipality if you're inside city limits and talk to them and find out. I know that in places like Olympia, you can have a trucking school, licensure and road approved in an afternoon. And in cities like Auburn, Washington, 9 months to get an answer on the license before you even know you can park your trucks there. So it's very different in each city that you're going to go to. So find out how business friendly that city is, and then maybe look at the county if you can get outside of city limits. So it's a good way to think outside the box, but there's a lot involved to making it have truck access, and then getting the ground, especially 5 acres, to the point where it can support the weight of trucks going in and out. Tom, I'm glad I made it back too. Chester, and my chat moved. Sorry. That's all. That hotel staff would be there at 7:30, especially since you're on East Coast. Yeah, it's 7:30 in Florida. Yeah. Antonio, howdy. Hi, Dion. Glad to put your video on LLC. Thanks for the lesson learned. Much from you. Warning trigger video. Thank you. Yes. I'm really glad I made that video too, because I've wanted to find a video like that and link it and send it to somebody. So for a long time, I was sending Meet Kevin's video. And then there's an article write-up on why you probably don't need an LLC that I was sending. But now I have actually one that touches on all the points that I think are important to send off to people. Lumberjack Landlord, howdy. Looking good, keynote speaker. Yes, thanks. That reminds me I should talk about that. If anybody is interested in Portland, May 13th and 14th, there is a Northwest, make sure I get the name right, Northwest Action Summit. Then there's going to be several speakers. The keynote guy isn't really good looking, but he's got some info that I like. Kurt is going to talk. He's their MC, and he's going to talk about flipping. Kurt McLaughlin. Melissa Dorman is going to be there for creative financing. Kyle Robertson is going to talk about multifamily. John Robinson is going to talk about wholesaling. Bob Boschler is going to talk about hard money and lending. Derek Sherrill is going to talk about house hacking and an ADU. He's got a really good strategy using ADUs. And Jennifer Florent she's also an MC, and she's talking on taking that first step. And then the keynote speaker is me, and I'm going to talk about the 6 steps to getting started in investing, and then break down each one of those steps for the people that are there, so they can leave with some steps that they could take action on, no matter which step that they're on. And so that's May 13th and 14th in the Portland area. And I will put my email in the chat here in a little bit. If anybody has questions about that, reach out to me, and I will give you some details. I'll be there for both days. I think there's a dinner where most of us are going to dinner. Yeah, I'm actually looking forward to it, not only just to get to be the keynote speaker on a subject that I like, but I'm going to go and sit through some of these classes. Antonio, just one question. When you escrow on your mortgage, does the bank charge fees? And if they do, how much do they usually charge? The banks I work with haven't charged a fee. It wouldn't save me any money to pay myself or have it paid from escrow. The only thing to really pay attention to is that it actually gets paid. Normally, it's never been a problem. But last year in 2021, I closed on a property in May. And then the mortgage that I close with usually sells within 2 or 3 days. Within 2 or 3 days, somebody else owns the mortgage. They kept it. It was the first one that they kept, and they kept it till October. In October, so from May till October, I had Fairway Mortgage. In October, they sold it to Specialized Loan Servicing something. October is when half the taxes are due, and for some reason, when insurance should have been taken care of. So both companies assumed the other took the escrow and paid taxes and insurance. So every now and then you want to check. Your county probably has a website to check your taxes. Your insurance company should have their number. Just call to make sure things are paid and current, because I wouldn't want to be in a situation where I have a claim on my property and someone else didn't make the payment. I prefer that. I only have one property where I pay it, and it's the same. I've checked whether I pay every month or if I pay all at once. Sometimes they will charge a monthly installment fee, and then you can pay 6 months at a time to get rid of that. But my insurance hasn't offered that. It's the same either way. Pallavi, howdy. Howdy, everybody. Anna, howdy. Well, your live is back. Glad I checked again. Good. I'm glad you checked too. It was back a few times. Michael, howdy. You have been so helpful with everything and have made it seem easy enough for an everyday investor to start. So thank you. Thank you. That is my goal. And I'm going to steal this from Michael Zuber. There is no special secret sauce. It's not like this is really, really complicated. It's just something that most people don't learn because it's not really taught anywhere. It's not in classes. And in the rabbit hole of YouTube University, there are a lot of people that lead you to a $10,000 or $15,000 weekend course where you'd be better off throwing that money at a bad deal and just losing it than taking a course, because you'd learn more. So I'm happy that I think a completely 100% average person like me can get information out so that the average, or sometimes better than average person, can take the information and use it. Chester. My chat moved. Sorry. Considering a rental has tax benefits that wipe out most of their taxable income, how risky would it be to put after-tax profit towards a down payment for borrowing or setting aside only for down payments? How risky would it be to put after-tax profit towards a down payment? Talk with your CPA. I think I understand your question. Throughout the year, you're going to have profit, and you don't know how to estimate how much you're going to owe at the end of the year. So could you put that money to work somewhere and then all of a sudden pop up with an IRS debt that you might not be able to pay? Um, Most tax professionals can give you a pretty good estimate. I've still never had a tax obligation from rental properties, but I'm buying. If you bought and you've fully depreciated a property down and rents have increased and you've paid off the mortgage, so you're getting all the cash, you're going to have a tax obligation you're really going to need to wrap your head around. But I'm buying properties every year, every year. I haven't gone the last 4 years, I haven't gone a year without buying a property. So that starts a new depreciation schedule. I still have depreciation on 6 of my 7 properties left. Um, and I have mortgages on 6 out of 7 properties. So even this year, I carried 8,900. So I'm gonna say 9,000 going forward. But anybody who's nitpicky when I share the numbers, $8,900 in a tax loss from this year is carried forward to next year on rental income. That's with $128,000 in rental profit. I was able to do it to where I show a loss. And this question was asked last week. It was a great question, so I'm going to go over it really quick. How do you stay bankable if you're showing a loss? Why would a bank lend you money? Because my loss is shown. First, I have a W-2 where I didn't show a loss because the IRS took, the technical term is, an F ton of taxes from my W-2 income. And I'm not a tax professional like um, the lumberjack landlord spouse is, so I don't get to use my rental losses against my W-2. But I get to show a loss with my rental profit because of write-offs and depreciation. When you go to qualify for a loan, the lender is going to add depreciation back in because that's a paper loss, not an actual loss. I've never had a year where my write-offs were more than my my cash flow, but my write-offs plus my depreciation has me showing a loss, which is what I tell my CPA that I want to do. If I ever had a year where I had a whole bunch of expenses, I could choose that some of those aren't write-offs. It would be illegal to write off more than you actually spent, but you don't have to take every tax write if you can on expenses. I always use the total amount of depreciation because if you ever go to sell, it doesn't matter if you used it or not. The IRS is going to assume you used all of the depreciation available. So you're going to have depreciation recapture on the full amount of what would have depreciated no matter what you did. And it doesn't impact your bankability. So I always take depreciation. It's the write-offs, which I haven't had to be creative with yet, but I could leave some expenses off of my taxes if I didn't want to look like I had too big of a loss. Hasn't been a problem yet. Mr. Banks, howdy. When you replace the appliances, where do you go? Do you upgrade the items that need replaced or look for the best deal? So I, in almost all my properties, I don't put in a washer and dryer. If I was going to do a washer and dryer, I have 2 places where I do put the washer and dryer in. It's an older couple that was in there before I got it, and I don't want to change the way that things are with them. I have a local used appliance place that has a really good 1-year warranty, free pickup and delivery, washer and dryer sets, and stoves from them are very affordable. So I'll do that kind of stuff. I have Class C neighborhood, Class C areas too. So I'm not in, and I have a video that just came out last week on what A, B, and C and D neighborhoods are. If I had a higher end property or higher end upgraded stuff like Matt the Lumberjack landlord wants to put in, I probably wouldn't go to a used place to find those. For things like refrigerators, I usually put in a new one. They last decades and they're about $700 for a rental. I literally was supposed to have one delivered today, but got a message saying that they didn't show up. So I have to call tomorrow and figure out how Lowe's didn't get that refrigerator delivered. So that's where I go, is Lowe's. I'll check Lowe's and Home Depot for refrigerators and dishwashers. Those I usually just do new. Stoves, washer and dryer, I'll do used. And so check a local store for that. Keith, howdy. What would you consider over leveraged in a percent to assets? So it's a great question. A lot of people start out over leveraged because the first property that we buy, the first investment, especially for house hacking, we're going to put down a smaller down payment. We will use a VA loan, FHA loan, owner occupied, conventional loan of 3 or 5%. So we start out 90+% leveraged on that first property. That's the only time I suggest being that levered. From that point on, I save up down payments, 20 or 25%. And I know that's not the thing everybody wants to hear because it slows things down. The first 5 years, I bought a property at 2 years and a property at 4 years, and then it started to speed up. Those first 2 happened really slow. It took 2 years to save for the first one, 2 years to get the next one, and then a little less than 2 years for the next one, and then a year, and then Now how do I not overshare that? Because I always want to be really careful saying, because the focus is the new investor, the person just starting out. And in my mind, that's still me. 10 years ago, $17 an hour, 3 kids, teaching people how to drive trucks, a lot of bad debt. And now, if I don't find a property to buy at least once a year, there ends up being like a couple $100,000 sitting in an account I have to figure out what to do with. So saving up the down payment gets easier and easier. It's in those first years that it sucks. My goal is to never be over 70% leveraged as an overall position. I want to keep 30% equity. And that's my goal. I'm a little above 50% leveraged because in the last 2 years we've saw, what is the word, incredible? Because inflation is bad, but it causes appreciation. And we've seen incredible appreciation. I mean, over 20%. One of the years and like 19% the other year. So I'm less levered than I would have been if we didn't have that much appreciation. So my goal is to get closer to 70% because I don't want to be under levered too. Under leverage is the thing. If you pay all cash for something, let's say you pay $100,000 for a property, nice round number, and it goes up 10%, you gain $10,000. If I'm 75% levered on a property and I put down $100,000, that means I could buy a $400,000 property and it goes up 10%, same 10% as the other property. I now gained $40,000 instead of 10. So I want to stay close to 70% levered. I'm at 50 something. I don't know that I will do a cash out refinance. I think I'm probably going to buy the next property, and I share my numbers. I try to keep it as general so people can reproduce it. But so you understand my situation. I've saved up the down payment for the next property. So my goal is to find a fourplex that costs a little over $1 million and you do a down payment. Immediately after that, I'm probably going to use my VA loan and find another fourplex and do a house hack with 0 down. I haven't used my VA loan yet, but I think buying another property for over $1 million with 0 down is going to put me closer to 70% levered across the board, so that I'm gaining appreciation on on the largest amount without being over leveraged. I hope any of that I just said made sense. It made sense in here. Words are hard. Chester. To the bell curve point, wouldn't you be able to scale your system with a system focusing on relatively low effort expansion? So, right, mine is a system of relatively low effort expansion. When you have someone like the lumberjack landlord who buys and then he does a rehab and he recycles the cash flow, there's a whole bunch of steps in there that I'm just not doing because mine is, how do you worded it right? Focusing on relatively low effort expansion. So that is working for my bell curve. And then I think I was saying a sweet spot of once I get to 20 or 30 properties, 20 or 30 units with 10 properties. Here's the mental shift. And I don't know if I can put this into words yet. My goal was to make a video on this. So this is the Cliff Notes version of what will eventually be a video. When do we stop saving for investments? It takes me, and I have to try to spend this much, probably $35,000 a year to live. I house hack and being paid to live where I do. I drive paid off cars. I eat out all the time, so I don't have the expense of keeping stuff in the refrigerator that's going to go bad. Eating at home would cost me 3 more times than it could cost me to go and eat out. So I live kind of frugally, but I have all the streaming services. I take trips like this. But even that, my expenses this year, even with the 2-month trip here and an Airbnb to scuba dive, did I say 2 months? It sounds better than 1 month. But I'm not going to spend $35,000. When we take out housing and transportation costs, it's hard to spend as much as everyone else does with those included. So everything that's extra is going to the investing account. It is constantly building up the next down payment. So you're right. It's low. I got to learn those words. Low effort expansion would be good to continue. But at some point, if I just stopped saving for expanding, I would have, the cash flow now is like $14,000 a month and I'm spending less than 3. What would life look like if I started trying to spend $14,000 a month and not add more properties? I haven't worked out how that's going to sound in a video yet because I don't know the answer. Dirkstar, howdy. Don't recognize your map. What is that from? So this is the same map that I normally do that has the red lines all over it. It's the Dragonlance map, but it's technically it's a sheet. All my other maps are tapestries, and they're thick. They're meant to be carpet that you can walk on or wall tapestries. This is basically the thickness of a sheet so that when I travel, it'll actually fit in a bag because I don't check luggage unless I'm taking a gun. And I have a friend with guns in Florida, so I didn't need to bring one. So I didn't check a bag. So it fits in a bag. Same map, different size. I haven't got a way to hang it up better yet either. Cody, howdy. Dirkstar, would you refi at a similar rate to pull out equity of your primary in this environment to get started, or hold off on another year saving for down payment? I probably have an unpopular opinion you're not going to want to hear. I've never taken out equity. No cash out refinance, no home equity line of credit. I know that Matt, the lumberjack landlord, and Michael Zuber have larger portfolios doing that. I'm a fan of saving a down payment. Your first property or two is when you're going to make your biggest mistakes. I wouldn't want you to put your home or your retirement accounts or something that you've saved up at risk if it's in an asset like that. When you save and you put a down payment on the property and you make your mistakes and you lose some money, you're not putting your house or your retirement account at risk. 5 or 10 years later, when you have 2 or 3 or 4 properties and you've learned how long a rehab takes, how to screen tenants, how to get your rents right, what your expenses are probably actually going to be, how long it would actually take to rehab a place and get a tenant in place, or how long is the gap month between when you close on a mortgage and when your first mortgage payment is due. Once you have all of that just as like subconscious, then maybe pull out equity and put it to work. I don't recommend getting started with that. A lot of people, those first 2 years are the hardest. You don't know what's going to work. You don't know the income snowball is going to be a thing. And right now, the stage you're in, when you're saving for the first investment, there are 6 steps that I go over. The first one is learning how to save. Whatever your savings rate is, how do you increase it? And that can be increasing your income, reducing your expenses, setting it up towards automatic, the pay yourself first kind of thing. One of the reasons why people are able to put money into a 401k is because they never see it. So one of the ways people can put money into a savings account is if you automate it from your paycheck so you don't see it. Like there's all kinds of stages of the saving stage. It's not like you learn how to save, okay, I'm ready to go on the next thing. You learn how to save, and that goes out through your whole investing career. And then your credit score. Are you at a 740 or higher? Because that's when it makes the best sense to qualify for a mortgage because you're going to get the best rates, terms, and fees. And then talk to a lender because as you save, every penny, every dollar that you put into there increases the amount of money that you have for down payment, closing costs, immediate repairs, and reserves. The 4 things that the lender is going to want to make sure that you have, that as that scales, so does the number and size of the properties that you can make offers on grow. So all of that's happening in this first year where it doesn't feel like you're doing anything because you're waiting to make a down payment. But all of that takes kind of daily discipline to make it work. So hopefully that is not upsetting to hear, but I'm a fan of saving a down payment and not putting your primary house at risk, even though it's how my brother did it. My brother took out a home equity line of credit and bought a rental and then paid it off and then bought a rental and paid it off and bought a rental and paid it off. But it took him 30 years to get to 10. So I don't know which way is better. I think my way is a bit safer. And remember, this is not, and this is a quote directly from Michael Zuber. It's not get rich quick. It's get wealthy for sure. Dirkstar, when you are self-managing a project like a garage repair, how much effort does that take you in terms of hours of your own time? Do you visit job sites always? I'm glad you asked that question because I might not have been clear earlier. I'm going to show you an image of the most lazy person on the planet. That's him. To replace the garage door, I got a text from the tenant saying that it wasn't working. I got a picture from the tenant saying that this is the reason it's not working. I went on the Thumbtack app. I talked through emails with 3 contractors that do garage doors. One was delayed for like a month and a half because of supplies. One gave me a quote of 2,600 or 3,500 for the insulated better door, and the other one gave me a quote of 1,500 or a little over 2,000 for the insulated door, and a timeline of like, you want us out there tomorrow? And I went through their reviews. So I spent about 5 minutes reading reviews on the Thumbtack app. I accepted the quote, told them go ahead. The day of the project, so that's two texts from the tenant, probably 5 emails back and forth on Thumbtack, and some time reading the reviews. So I'm at 20 minutes now at least into this project, and then the day of the project, I had to send $980, which was half the pre-tax amount. They get it done. They send me pictures. So 2 communications, and then I pay the second half, plus I added a tip, and that's it. And then I've had a couple of texts from the tenant saying, oh, wow, that was quick. Thank you so much. So to do that self-managing, maybe a half an hour. Yeah. So that's how much time. No, I don't visit job sites hardly ever. When have I ever visited? No, I've visited job sites. I've painted. I've had a couple times where it's a weekend. I got nothing to do. I'll go paint this instead of hiring somebody. When have I visited? I don't think I visited a job site for a problem. Nope. Lazy guy right here. Working full time. Still have 3 kids, even though they're 18 and out. You would think that means that they take less time and energy and effort, but oh my God. And run this nonprofit that does job placement and the YouTube. So I have enough on my time to have systems in place. Thumbtack app is great for finding contractors, getting quotes, reading reviews, getting projects done. I keep 2 handymen that I try to give work to all the time, and I try to refer them to everybody that I know that invests to keep them working, so they like to work for me, so that when I have a problem like that pops up, it's texts, emails, and maybe a phone call. I hope that helped. My chat moved, sorry. Asaf, howdy. Dirkstar, how long does it take you a month to self-manage your properties? What takes you the most time? 2 hours is the average. I have had a couple of times where something would take, like the plumbing issue one time where the guy replaced the pipes with PEX. Because it was like, snake the drain, didn't work, found a leak, fixed that. So it was like 4 or 5 communications there, and an actual phone call. 2 hours on average. So 24 hours a year, which would have cost me over $20,000 to have a property manager do it if I had 0 tenant turnover. So the first year, it felt like it took me 20 hours a week to manage 1 tenant because I didn't have any systems in place. I didn't have a list of phone numbers of these are the 24-hour emergency plumbers I'm going to call. These are the electricians I'm going to call. I didn't know Thumbtack app was a thing. I didn't have my handyman on like basically, I want to say speed dial, but that's not a thing anymore. Have their contact info saved. I didn't set expectations with tenants. How you communicate with your tenant dictates a lot of them. And so the breakdown that I do is the 3 words. I tell them, if these 3 words are in the conversation, you're going to call me. Fire, flood, or blood. If the conversation is going to include any one of those 3 words, it's a phone call. If it doesn't have those 3 words, it's a text. And then if it's a text that I think is going to be important or starts to become important, I shift the text to email. Because in Washington State, and like in a lot of areas, emails are admissible in court and texts are not. So setting expectations with tenants on what is an emergency, what should come to me, and then after a handyman has done a couple things at a property, my handymen know that if a tenant calls them because they have their contact info after they've dealt with them a few times, and the project is going to cost them $500 or less, they just do it. And then they tell me, hey, I went and I retrued the door, and it'll be $150, or whatever the price would be. If it's more than 500, they are going to contact me, and then we're going to make a decision together. And I have not had a bad problem with that yet because I worked with the handyman several times before I let that be a thing. But that takes a lot off my plate. I'm in Florida right now, and I don't think I'll think about my rentals other than every time I pay for something, be like, this is not my money. This is not my money. Because I have the handyman that the tenants can call. So yeah, it doesn't take up a lot of time. It's get those systems in place because while yes, I think Matt and Mike are killing it with their huge portfolios, right? I want to feel good about adding the next fourplex. And if I know that it's going to take my 2 hours a month to 2 hours and 20 minutes a month, I'm going to want to add a fourplex. If I thought it was going to add a whole nother week's worth of work a month for me, I would not want that, not, another fourplex. I'd be better off just having a job. So systems are really important for motivation too. What takes me the most time? How's there a way to say this without sounding like a douche? There isn't. Counting money. So that's as a self-managing person, I have a video on my channel called How I Collect Rents. 3 things I consider. The first thing is I want to make it easy on the tenant. And I do that by using a format that most tenants are familiar with. So some like Zelle, some do ACH, some want to do Venmo, Cash App, Google Pay, Apple Pay. So I'll accept any of those. A couple of them, one just gives me 12 checks. She writes them out. So I have these checks that I brought 2 checks with me because I had to deposit. I deposited this one and I have to deposit May's before I go back. And then another person might send a check. So I'll do those with the app, right? Well, I have to, at the beginning of the month, it sounds funny. The most time consuming thing I do is to go through 16 rental properties, almost 16 formats of taking rent, and to make sure each one came in the time that it came in. I've never had a later missing payment, but that's probably the most time consuming. Terrible problem to have. The first week of the month is the weirdest because my systems are really simple. With 16 rental units, I have one checking account, one savings account, one credit card, one Excel spreadsheet. That's I put the rents in there. But I watch that checking account at the beginning of the month go rents, mortgage, rents, mortgage, mortgage, rents, mortgage, rents, mortgage. Like it just vertical pong for the whole week. Tom, who was better cash flow? You self-managing recycled cash flow, the lumberjack landlord, 100+ properties with capital recycled, or Mike with property management? So they have better cash flow than me currently with over 20 years of investing each. Matt, the lumberjack landlord, and me are going to make a video comparing those first 10 years. I believe when you scale numbers the way they did, where you add rental units, it scales hockey stick. Like the first 10 years kind of start off slower because they're recycling capital. So the cash flow is really almost not even a factor. Me, cash flow started off 600+ per unit kind of from the beginning, and then it grew from there. So the first few years I probably looked like I had better cash flow because I was fighting for financial freedom. So the first 10 years I might have actually looked a little better, right? Because if you look at the next 10 years, mine will grow like this. It will just stay this consistent. Theirs is exponential. So theirs is a better plan if exponential growth is your goal. Mine in this growth was to get to about this point, and then all of this is extra. Both strategies work. It depends on what your ultimate goals are. Tom, ELDs suck. I work, so statute of limitations on about 7 years, so I can talk about this. I worked at a farm called Wilcox Farms in Washington State. And this was back in the day. So the people that I worked for don't even work there anymore. But you had a login number for your ELD before they were called ELDs. And then you had a mechanic's login number. So you'd run out of your hours, and then you'd log out and log in the mechanic, and then you'd run out of their hours. So I'd have 21-hour days. So ELDs suck, but it's not safe to be on the road for 21 hours. Chester. Tom, I'd venture to guess lumberjack landlord has highest cash flow because recycled capital. Yeah. Brett. Howdy. Tom, I know he's getting more appreciation net worth. Just curious about, yeah. So their cash flow is multiples of mine. I mean, literal multiples of mine. And they don't share their numbers. I'm transparent on mine. So here's proof that they're doing so much better than me. I'm still poor enough to where I can share my numbers and I don't offend people. They're doing so well that it's like Michael Zuber says, If he talked about, if you get to 100 units or 187 units, he had one the first time I heard him say this, here's what your life can be like. Nobody would listen to him. Who in the world can get to 187 units, right? But he says, get to 4. Your life will change when you get to 4 and people listen. It's subconscious. That's attainable. So Matt and Mike are doing it really well, that they've gained success that's like unrelatable, but they present the information for us to go, I could do that. I could take those strategies and do that. And, I'll get to 4, get to 10. I mean, it's a pipe dream to get to the 100 or the 200 that they're at, but it's actionable. So they're doing it really well. I'm not even doing well enough to have to hide my numbers yet. So Chester, and congrats on the 3rd Business Insider article, Dion. I wholeheartedly recommend it to everyone on the income snowball. Thank you. The really cool thing with the Business Insider is, so they did an article on reaching financial freedom as a single parent. So kind of my story. And then they got a really good response. So the way they judge it, and this is the reason that they've had us on there, so YouTube makes money because people watch videos and see commercials, right? So you see advertisements. Business Insider makes their money because people get subscriptions. Well, our stories resonated with a bunch of people. So people in the real estate realm bought subscriptions to read Mike's and Matt's and my stories. So they came back and they've done another story on the binder method, getting a tenant to request rent increase. And then they just released the income snowball. For people looking for information on how to reach financial freedom or how to do buy and hold investing, this information is great. But there is, this will tell me how many older people there are that are watching. There is, unseen by most, another world, a dark side of people who don't like landlords, don't like capitalism, don't like success. So Millennial Mike and I, and I think Lumberjack Landlord and I, depending on if we can coordinate it or not, are going to talk about the thousands of comments in some Reddit groups calling for basically our execution because we're successful. That's going to be fun. But thank you, Chester. Adam, howdy. Why do you hate King County? I want to say it's not a blue or a red thing. It's a litigious thing. I run a truck driving school, commercial driver school. We put a campus in Thurston County. I go into the office at noon. At 4:00 in the afternoon, I'm walking out with a business license and everything in place to run a truck driving school as we add a campus. Original campus is in Pierce County, so Lakewood. I go to Auburn. 9 months later, I don't even have an answer on if I can get a business license there or not to put in a trucking campus. I have hundreds of students who live there and employers who live there, who work there, who want to employ those people. So hundreds of people postponed on jobs that they could have. Employers not able to promote people from forklift to driver and triple their income because of a county that hates business. I get a hold of and it's not quite bribery, but I get a hold of the Economic Development Council, find out the guy who chairs the Economic Development Council, get him involved and say, look, this is how we impact it, and get the right people talking. And then finally the city's like 4 days later, oh, you have a license. 9 months and 4 days with manipulating people, or 4 hours. That's how big a difference it is on a business side. Pierce County, Thurston County, we actually live in Washington State. There's an RCW, a revised code of Washington. Rent control is illegal in Washington State. It's a law. RCW, it's a code. It's a code of law? I don't know. What's a code for the state? King County, Seattle. In Seattle proper, which it's like dropping a rock in a pond. It'll be concentric circles. Seattle, King County, state. So eventually the whole state could get this. But in Seattle, they go, well, we can't do rent control. So what we'll do is if a landlord increases rents by more than 10% and the tenant doesn't want to stay, then the landlord has to pay to move the tenant. That's rent control, which goes against the code. Every law, every rule that comes up in King County is against business. There are people who are successfully investing there. Beth Traverso is killing it, but not me. It's gambling. A rule or law is going to change in King County in the next 6 months to a year that will impact your investing strategy where you made a 30-year commitment or a 30-year plan or a 10-year plan that's changed by some legislation there because what was it, Chapel Hill or whatever it was, where the cops weren't allowed in and people could run the world. That doesn't happen in Pierce or Thurston County. Too many rednecks would show up with guns and that stuff would be gone. But in King County, the cops would protect the people who wouldn't let the cops in. No thanks. So there you go. Was that apolitical enough? Because it wasn't blue or red. It's the location. There is something that causes insanity in the leadership in King County. Brett, hey, new map. No, same map, different colors. This is the one with the red lines on all over it, but it's a more, I guess it's a new map. I've used it before a couple times. It's my traveling map because it's thinner and it's easier to pack up because I'm in Florida. Julie, thank you. You're welcome. Tom, Julie, good thought, but truckers are dirty. Lots of maintenance and labor upkeep to consider too. I've seen some disgusting things from the guys. I am a trucker son. I'm speaking from observation. Cool. It's funny, Tom. I drove trucks for 17 years and I've never really referred to myself as a truck driver. To me, truck drivers are the guys that go over the road. They're gone all the time. Local truck driver. I'm not a truck driver. I was just at a local job. Lumberjack landlord. There is a secret sauce. You'll be selling it at 9 quadrillion per bottle. I like it. I'll buy it. Oh, we're at an hour. I have no alcohol here. So if anybody lives near Cape Coral, Florida, let me know where a good place to go out is. Dirk Star, Three Amigos special sauce, extra spicy. Secret. Tom, your bank didn't pay your taxes on time and they got a tax sale notice. Yes, if so, that's what's happening with me. And the county for property taxes told me about some fee. I provided proof that it was, what do they call it? Not amortized. I hate when words go away. Escrowed. And then the fee went away. And I wanted to call and say, no, make them pay the fee. But the fee went away. Pam, howdy. Have a kid who is about to graduate from college, just got this first job. I think you said something about getting 2 years of credit when applying to a loan if working in the same industry as a degree. I don't know if it's 2 years of credit, but there is, if it's in a related field, lenders will look at that as work history. So I don't know that they just go, oh yeah, that counts for 2 years, but it gives them a factor where they might say something like, show us 3 months in that job and then we'll consider it. It's a lot less than the full 2 years that's required. I would just check with lenders and realize that they're not all made the same. Check around with at least 3 or 4 of them. And my chat moved. North Colorado Dawn, howdy, good evening. Rich, howdy. Ben, cheers. Asaf, for out-of-state investment, what do you think about investing in different market states? Is this wise for spreading risk, or do you recommend buying all properties in the same area? So it's a version of what I do. I don't want all my properties in one area. Like I wouldn't want to buy a 10-unit apartment complex when I was first starting out and have that be my only asset. The lighting situation here was about to get really interesting. You got it? Okay. All right. So, absolutely lost my train of thought. So I keep my properties spread out. I have small multifamily that are at least 10 miles apart. So that if something like a base closes, Amazon moves away, Boeing closes, a port closes, or something that happens where I wouldn't lose all of my tenants. So it is a strategy to invest in several markets. But to me, I'm in 2 counties spread out more than 10 miles apart. If you're trying to learn different states, it's really hard, even in just my 2 counties, to always know top of mind awareness the areas I want to avoid. There's a couple areas I know the cops can't go there by themselves, so I'm not going to invest there. But if you're in another state, it would be really hard to do that. So maybe if you spent 2 or 3 years investing in one state because you took the time and to learn it, and then moved to another state, I wouldn't be doing 3 different footprints in 3 different states at the same time. So I like being spread out, but I like being in the amount of area that you have the mental bandwidth to handle. Rich, howdy. Chester, I'm glad you mentioned the VA loan. Could you discuss or make a video on when it's a good time to maximize using alternative traditional loans, both before and after acquiring the first property? Sure, that's a good idea for a video. Also, once you hit 10 loans in your own name, what are some of the strategies to move forward from there? Tom Kine, Tom. CW, my opinion is you do what it takes to get the property on the property ladder. Yep. Rankin, howdy. Hello from Punta Cana. You're on vacation. Nice. I'm almost on vacation. I'm in Florida for a month or two, and I'm going to do a bunch of scuba, but I'm still going to be working every day. Most of my work can be done from a laptop, which hopefully doesn't work after I'm going to throw it through the wall for not working when I tried to start this today. Tom, accept an alligator. Yeah, don't get on the property ladder with an alligator, which is what most people do. Like the majority of homeowners buy a home that they're going to pay for. Most people don't think of house hacking. They don't think of using owner occupied lending to acquire a house that they're only going to live in for a year. So it's an alligator for that year, and then they turn it into a rental. Most people think I'm going to buy a house because I deserve a house because I work really hard. And then I'm going to save for these investments, and I'm going to use investing loans, which is not as good as owner occupied loans, and which is going to slow it down. And yeah, hardly a lot of people look at this, in my opinion, backwards. Getting on the property ladder is an investment property. It's better if it can be an investment property you use owner occupied loans to get. Andres, howdy. Would you buy a house with foundation issues under market value? There is a really, I think, a good market is looking for houses that have foundation issues that other people are staying away from. Find in your area a contractor that's good with foundations. Read reviews, talk to other investors, somebody who's done work in your area that's good at doing foundation repairs. Meet with them. Tell them you're going to have projects that they can do, but you're going to be looking to purchase properties that they can do foundation repair on. Almost like having your home inspector. Like I have a company I prefer to use. I just like the way they do business. I would have a foundation expert that I can also say, when I'm looking at buying properties, I'm going to want you to go like you're an inspector and get into the crawl space and tell me what it's going to take to fix it. Give me an estimate, and then I'm going to take that estimate and probably add a third to it. And then if I can add that third of that cost and that foundation issue into my cost to acquire. For instance, I normally almost buy properties always that need less than $1,000 worth of work. I want already occupied. That's what I want. Next, I'll take rent ready. I have purchased a house that I knew needed a roof. So I thought, I got a roof guy. I'll get a quote, how much, and he can give me a quote. So with that amount of money to replace the roof, added into my cost to acquire, would I get the return that I wanted? Still bought it. So once you have a relationship with a good foundation expert in your area, and you start looking at properties, literally telling agents you're looking for places that have foundation issues, but you're going to get a quote from a foundation repair person. Plumbing, electric, roof, most of us see these expenses we expect when we buy a place, but a lot of people hear foundation and they go, yep, I'm out of here because that's more than I can handle. There's an entire industry of home movers. Pick the house up, take it over, make a whole foundation, put it down. Almost any foundation issue can be fixed. get a quote from somebody that you trust that does good work in your area, add that to your cost to acquire. I would buy a property with foundation issues all day long. Remember, the goal as an investor, usually for most people, not the lazy, really lazy person like me, is to find a problem you can fix. So Matt the Lumberjack Landlord is a great example of this. When he makes an offer on a property, he tries to find out what matters to the seller. Is it price? Is it close? Is it they need a place to stay for 90 days and because they need to close on the other one? Is it whatever matters to the seller? Include that in your offer if it's possible and it still gets to the return you're looking for. So if somebody has a home with foundation issues, they're looking at it like this is really hard to sell. So when you come in and you get your quote and you can get the return you're looking for with that expense, you're probably more likely to get the deal. So all day long. And I don't know if it's under market value that matters as much as would that cost more. Rich, howdy. I like your brother, right? Julie, it would look like you have a new girlfriend. Look like you have a new girlfriend. No. No girl would date this. They know better. Tom, I would like Chester Williams to live stream so we can ask numbers. You're a wealth of knowledge. I think you should too. Dirkstar, how impressed are your kids with you having your YouTube subscribers? I don't think one of my daughters knows. I don't know if I think my son is impressed with YouTube because he watches some of these videos. So I try not to talk about him too much. And my other daughter, she's never mentioned it. So I don't know. They're impressed with the real estate. They're impressed with going from up to uh, 10 years. So Tom, maybe you could open a brewery or distillery with that 14K cash flow. Actually, I'm such a nerd. I thought of opening a gaming store. Like get a storefront where the back is all gaming tables for Axis and Allies, D&D, Magic the Gathering, all those types of in-person kind of games, and then the front is an inventory. But then I remember how lazy I am, and while I would enjoy that, it would be a good use of money. I'm still too lazy. I don't know. Tom, call it lazy days. Perfect. Chester, I think that would be cool to do. I think it would be too. Shamir, howdy. Can you use depreciation on your primary residence? So if you live in a single family house, no. If you live in a duplex, you can use depreciation on half of the buildings. If you live in a triplex, you can use it on 2/3 of the buildings. If you live in a fourplex, depreciate 3/4 of it. So talk with your CPA. It depends on your living situation. You're not supposed to be able to depreciate a primary residence. It's to depreciate an investment property. But it's the percentage that you're using when it's multifamily or small multifamily. Lumberjack Landlord, we are doing that video for sure. Get your popcorn, folks. It'll be the best video ever done. I think it'll be fun. I wonder, we'll have to figure out what kind of sound we want to make when we bleep words out. Keith, smash the like button. Thank you. I appreciate it. We are at 36, so I appreciate that. And I appreciate the questions, because this is a really cool thing with live streams is there are topics I want to make videos on, but there are topics you want covered. So when enough questions come in asking on similar things, then I know to make a video on that. Johnny Cashflow Ramirez, howdy. What's up, real estate freaks? Rich. Long live Mason County. Yes, exactly. That's Shelton, right? Shelton and out that way. Adam, howdy. Do you recommend investing in Texas single-family rental homes? I recommend investing anywhere where there's a yield that meets what you're looking for. The thing I would watch in Texas that I hear this often, and I haven't done the research to know exactly what it means, but I always hear everybody say, this is the thing to watch in Texas. Taxes reset annually. And everybody says that like it's a bad thing. So it must be something different than in Washington, where every year taxes reset annually. We get a thing from the county tax assessor saying, this is what we currently assess your property at. So this is your taxes. So when you buy a property, a lot of people will look at the listing. And we know that the pro forma that the lender, that the listing agent puts on there is a load of crap. They can make up whatever they want. It literally says in the thing, you need to verify these numbers because there's no possibility that these are true. Probably words are different. So we know not to trust the rents. And they'll list the property taxes. Well, those property taxes are based on the last time the property was sold and incremental increases each year. When you purchase a property, you create a factual event that tells the county tax assessor what the current value of that property is. So I would I would run the numbers, figure out in your county what percent they use for rent for taxes, figure out at your purchase price what will those taxes be going forward, factor that into your purchase price. Texas is a huge place. I'm sure that there are great markets and there are markets to avoid, so you'd want to study and then figure out what's working in that area. An example I've used several times is in Washington State. I have not seen a single family house that would cash flow as an investment property to purchase it. So I went to small multifamily. The only single family I own is actually one I purchased before I was an investor. So yes, I would suggest investing in Texas. Be ready for the tax change and study the market and learn what is working there. Someone is investing there successfully. It could be single family, house with ADU, small multifamily, storage, multifamily, short-term rental, traveling nurses. It could be all kinds of things. Figure out what's working and do that. Chester, I believe the codes and ordinances are laws at different levels. Yeah. Highest local level and state codes, which are, of course, subordinate to federal laws. Kelly, howdy. I'm looking at a part-time job about 1.5 hours away that involves being on call for 72 hours straight. Thinking of getting property so I can use as second home. So second home purchases can make sense, especially if you have another use for it. A 1.5 hour commute for a part-time job, that would be a challenge for me, unless it pays really well or it's just really something that you want to do. Real estate is super cheap near a Canadian border. Single family house duplex go for 6 plus. Single family can be as cheap as 30 to 50K. 6 plex is 160K. So it sounds like you're investing where Ashley Kerr from BiggerPockets invests. That's kind of the prices that she tends to quote. If the prices are in that range, getting the duplex or triplex, if they're less than 70,000 like that, sometimes it's hard to secure lending. You'll have so shop around lenders to find one that doesn't have as high of a minimum that those do. That would be one thing to consider. So I was kind of looking at doing the same thing. I live in Washington State. We were looking at putting a truck driving school in Arizona, and then we we chose Idaho instead. I was looking at buying small multifamily in either one of those states so that I could technically house hack both states. That way you get low owner occupied lending at a fixed rate debt, but it could still be a cash producing asset. If you buy a fourplex, my fourplexes are cash flowing more than the expenses. Rob, howdy. If I was going to spend a couple months in Florida, I think I would have chosen the winter months versus spring just to avoid the Seattle rain. I wanted to avoid the Seattle people. So I chose this for scuba diving because for that, it doesn't matter that it's kind of warmer. But you're right, better time to come here is during the winter. Bill, howdy. A lot of lenders stop at 4 loans. How do you know if a bank lender does more than typical 4 loans without having to call each other one individual? Thanks. Okay, great question. What you have is dated information. In 2015 and 16 and before, since the housing crash, 4 loans was the limit. Right around 2016, they upped that to 10 loans in your name, 10 loans in each of your names if you're married. So I have 6 mortgages, and I was using Wells Fargo, Fairway Mortgage. I checked with Guild Mortgage, um, a couple of other of the mainstream ones. All of them will go up to 10 in your name currently. I think as we try to fight inflation and as we try to stop housing prices from going up, we could see a shift from 10 down to something less. But currently, it's 10. And once you go to 10, then you can go to non-QM, you can go to asset-based lending. So there's a couple options there too. So if you're at 4 and the lenders in your area, because maybe you're in another state or not state, another country where they did limit you to 4, look at non-QM loans, asset-based lending, seller financing, other options to get more loans that aren't Fannie Freddie backed. Uh, yeah. And Tom Kine, of course, because he likes to mess with me, took a message out, so I will lose sleep tonight wondering what that message says. Tom, thanks, Dion. We are in a storm and the internet is out. It's Atchison. You'll see the rest later. Ciao, Tom. Thanks. Rob, when you buy an older house, do you test for lead and asbestos as part of your due diligence? Yes. I only have purchased one property older than 1979. So in my area, it was kind of easier to find 1980s and 90s properties. But I bought one from 1929. I had it tested for lead and asbestos. This is a great question to bring to Matt, the Lumberjack Landlord's Sunday morning live stream, because he invests in an area where a lot of the buildings are older, and he could probably walk you through that thought process. So the Lumberjack Landlord here on YouTube, Sunday mornings, catch his live stream, probably hit him with that question, and I bet he's got a good answer. Lumberjack Landlord, they reset in New Hampshire the same way. Nice. But everybody always says Texas for some reason, like it's a bad thing. So I'm gonna have to do some research and digging and find out if there's something different that happens there. Pallavi says my sound keeps breaking. Anybody else having issues with sound? Let me know. Um, that's not good. Lumberjack Landlord, property tax in New Hampshire like Texas. Yep. Con, howdy. Do taxes go up after a refinance? It is entirely possible if a mortgage is registered with the county and the appraisal goes in with the registration, that the county tax assessor has access to that appraisal. So it could impact your taxes. It's more likely to limit your ability to fight the taxes. If you have an area where you get a tax increase, but the other properties aren't paying more, you can go and try to have an arbitration to get the taxes lowered. If that county has it on record that you have an appraisal of a higher amount, probably not going to win. So it's possible. I didn't see it in my 2 refinances in 2020. So very small control group to get that, any kind of theory from. Adam, thank you. Murph Dog and Michael Channing and Tanisha. Everybody might be taking. I wonder if sound cut out and people were saying it or something. Okay. Keith, wait, let me see. Murph Dog, howdy. Michael, howdy. Tanisha, howdy. For the newbies, would you explain alligator rental? So an alligator is out of Michael Zuber's book, One Rental at a Time. He refinanced a property that was cash flowing to pull money out to buy another property. When he refinanced it, he increased the debt on the first property. I think he calls it Norris Drive. It was the property on Norris Drive. In his book, he talks about it. Well, that refinance increased the debt on that asset, making the money coming in less than the payment. So he was losing money every month on a property that used to produce money because of a decision he made to refinance. So he should have ran the numbers better to realize what would happen to the payment with the cash out refinance or the home equity line of credit. Or when you're buying a property, you don't want to buy a property where the expenses are more than the income. And we're actually looking for a return. So we want to get a percentage back every year. of the amount of money we invested to purchase the property. So alligator technically means every month you're paying some amount of money, it can be $1 or $1,000 to own a property. And even in a place where people say if you keep it for a year, the appreciation is going to make up for the loss, that appreciation is not guaranteed. And appreciation doesn't matter until you go to sell or later cash out refinance, which you can create an alligator for with again if you do. So alligator just means a property that takes money from you every month. Rich, thank you. Chester, sound is okay. Lowered resolution to, ooh, oh, that might be the problem. Might be the Wi-Fi here. Um, okay, sound was breaking. It's better now. Good. Thank you. Asaf. To make the 10 loans, you still need to get your DTI to around 40%, right? Higher the lender might not approve your fourth despite the 10 limit. Kinda. There's a video on my channel called Multiple Mortgages. The first 2 years, it would be very difficult to get 10 mortgages in your name because you would have to have the debt to income ratio to handle the debt of 10 mortgages. Once you purchase a property, and this is why my strategy went exactly how I did it, I moved from my house into an apartment. I lived in the apartment for 2 years and rented out my house so that I can get rental income on my tax returns for 2 years. Once you have that, lenders will look at rental income of all of your properties in your debt to income ratio. They'll take 75%. So if you have $10,000 in rent coming in, that means $7,500 is income in your debt to income ratio. So as long as you're buying cash flowing properties where you're making more than the expenses, those 10 mortgages, once the 2 years has passed, here's a direct quote from 3 different lenders I've worked with. There is no limit to the amount that you can borrow. It's based on you saving the down payment. So as I save up a 20% or 25% down payment, what I can purchase goes up. There is no limit because they're going to count the rental income of my properties and the property that I'm purchasing in my debt to income ratio. You need that 2-year track record to show a lender that you know how to find a lease, screen a tenant, collect rents, maintain properties. Once you do that, lending becomes very easy, and it literally is just getting to 10 in your name before you have to figure out a different lending strategy. But debt to income ratio is not a factor once you have rental income on 2 years tax returns. And again, this is one where you have the income, but they take depreciation out of your expenses. So it doesn't matter if you show a loss every year, that will be a positive once they take depreciation out. Julie, my son recently sold quite a few magic cards. He's making a killing. Would you ever consider investing in them? They seem like a currency to me, like crypto. I wouldn't. Um, I know people who do, but it's not to me a cash producing asset because you gain the money when you sell. That's the same reason I don't. One of the reasons I don't invest in stocks and I invest in real estate. My real estate pays me while I own it. Those magic cards aren't paying them while they own it. So I am not considering investing in those. And I do keep, a few $1,000s of cash in the safe, and then a couple ounces of gold. I prefer the 10th ounces because they're easier to change with. So if we ever have a time where, like Russia got all of their monetary system shut down, you need a way to, do money transactions for the next few weeks or whatever. That's the way I would go. I don't think a magic card would be something I could trade for food in an emergency. Um, so it's not something I've looked into, but I do know people who have made money off of those type of cards. I mean, a Pokemon Charizard card just sold for what, $425,000. So I know that there's money to be made there, but it's not something that I'm interested in doing. Asaf, sound broke a few minutes ago. Okay, no. Okay, now good. Chester, Keith, alligators cause the investor owner to have to write a check to cover the housing related costs instead of making you money. Michael, do you have any Burr properties? And if so, why or why not? So I'm going to talk for a few minutes to give people a chance to put questions in if they have them, because we are only at the, was it 9 o'clock here now? So got at least another hour if there's questions you guys have. I'll go as long as questions keep coming in. There is a video on my channel. I think I called it, on the thumbnail, it says to burr or not to burr. But in the title, it says how to burr and why I don't. A lot of people look at the burr method and it's flashy. It's got a cool acronym. It's talked about all over BiggerPockets. We hear about a lot of success stories. What we don't hear about is the failures, which is normal. We hear about success failures when it comes to investing. Hardly anybody goes on and says, this is how I lost a bunch of money. I mean, I talk about my first year trying to give the house away because I did everything wrong. Michael Zuber talks about losing a bunch of money in stocks. Matt, the lumberjack landlord, talks about losing money in stocks. I think he had a 90% loss on something. He had held dead stocks for a certain number of years, like with Cisco or something. I'm not a stock guy. I just know that they talk about their story. So we do talk about those kind of things, right? But who's ever heard of a burr property that failed? Like, that doesn't get on a YouTube channel. The problem I have with burr is it is an advanced strategy. There's a lot of basics a person needs to learn, usually through experience. How do you calculate rents? How do you get a yield on a property? How do you find tenants, street tenants, place tenants? Like, all these basics you need to learn. You want to add to that doing a rehab, which 10 years of investing, I've still not done a rehab. You want to add estimating the cost of a rehab and the timeline of a rehab, because you're going to borrow hard money to carry it for about a year while you do the rehab before the next refinance. So burr, for anybody who's not familiar, you're going to buy it, rehab it, do a rehab, rent it out, refinance it. So you're going to pull your money out and then you're going to repeat the process. So it sounds great. When you buy it, you have to buy a property. The reason we're using hard money or your own money or something private money is because the property wouldn't qualify for a conventional loan because it needs too much work. So that's why it's a buy property. I have a burr search set up. So properties under a certain amount in my area that need a whole bunch of work, I have that search set up. So as I'm saving a down payment, I consider doing a burr with 10 years of investing if I found the right property. I have made offers on a burr property a couple of times, didn't get them. But in the beginning, you borrow hard money because it wouldn't qualify for traditional lending. Now you have to rehab it. Okay, so if the rehab is done in an amount of time, great. But what about right now where we have supply chain issues and it can take you 90 plus days to get your windows? Matt's having that trouble himself. And then what if you get a tenant in there? So you've done the rehab and somehow you magically got it done in time. You get the tenant in there and you miscalculated rents because it's your first couple of properties. It's easy to do because you don't get to set the rents. Area average rent sets the rents. And a brand new house and a 15-year-old house don't rent out for much different. Tenants aren't looking at the age of the property. They're not looking at the square footage. They're looking at the number of bedrooms and how far it is from work or school. That'll dictate how much the rent is worth. Area average rents set rents. So maybe you get that right. So let's say you're doing great now. You bought the property for the right price. You used hard money. You got your rehab done on time at price. Then you get it rented out and you're actually making money. Now you go to do the refinance. We've been seeing appreciation like this. So a lot of people are looking at a burr thinking, if I get this 3 or 4 bedroom house up and running, the comps, because 4 units or less, are based on comparables, not income. What are the properties like that going for? So if a house right now would sell for $400,000 and I'm going to take 2 months to do my burr, I'm going to go, okay, at $400,000, if I buy it for 300 and I spend 50 on the rehab, and then I get a refinance out of 350,000. I get all my money back. I pay back the hard money, get all my money for the rehab in. I walk away with zero money, and I owe a cash floating property. When you buy a property, they look at the comps today because there is a human being making an offer saying, I want to buy this property for this amount. So your appraisal is more likely to come in at current area comps. When you go to do a refinance, you are not buying a property, you own a property. So the appraiser, and this is what an appraiser taught me, can't use current comps. They're going to go 6 months back, they're going to use dated history, and they're going to look at the comps from 6 months ago. So if you've been seeing 16% appreciation in a year, that would be 8% appreciation. So 8% of $400,000 is $32,000 you were expecting to see that you're not going to see. All of that is so confusing. I would not want to do that on my first couple of deals. With 10 years of investing and understanding how projects work, how to find contractors, still haven't done a rehab, but I think I have a pretty good feel for it. Knowing how refinancing works and how they're going to use older appraisals to estimate what my value would be. Like there's all these holes that a new investor can fall through that I think people should invest, have a few rentals, get the cash flow to support the mistakes we're going to make on those burrs, and then use the burr strategy. Michael Zuber didn't do burr his first 10 years. We're all traditional lending right off the MLS. In my first 10, all my deals are from the MLS, haven't needed rehabs. So I don't currently own any burrs. I'm making offers on burrs. I will do one eventually, but not today. But I don't recommend starting with that. Hopefully that's not upsetting to hear, because it's not what everybody likes to hear. They want to hear how sweet and simple and easy it is. Chester, how important is the debt to income ratio, as is a higher debt to income better or worse than a lower? So the lower your debt to income ratio is, the more attractive you look to a lender. But like I said, after the first 2 years of receiving rents, debt to income ratio is really not that important. It's not really looked at with asset-based lending. They will look at your credit score, but they don't usually look at your work history, your income, your debt to income ratio. They're looking at the performance of the property for an asset-based loan. What do they call it? DSCR or something. It's one of those acronyms. But the lower DTI is better to lenders. Oh, so Pallavi got the sound working, had to come back. Rob. Dion, do you know if the banks look at long-term rental income differently than short-term income even after the 2 years? Yes, they do look at it differently. That's changing recently, though. For several years, as short-term rentals were kind of a new thing, lenders were saying, how would this property perform with long-term tenants? That's what we'll use in your debt to income ratio. So if you were buying regular cash flowing properties, it really wasn't an issue. But if you were buying properties where you had to have short-term tenants to make a profit for a few years, that was pretty difficult. But starting a little over a year ago, I've talked to lenders and they will look at history of what you've been doing with short-term rentals. And there's even some lenders now that are looking at area short-term rental history. So there's data that they can use to do that, calculating it. I don't know if that's going to get more common or less common as places like Hyatt and that DoubleTree and those kind of places that are in the lawsuits to try to stop short-term rentals are going to impact it. But currently it's becoming more common than it was a couple of years ago to be able to use short-term rental when figuring out your debt to income ratio. But for the first few years, it's like it didn't even exist. Chester, a 425 Charizard card? Yeah. Talk about a hot market for Pokemon cards. Carrie, howdy. Dion, are you opposed to using a home equity line of credit finance on an investment property? I am not opposed to a home equity line of credit after you have a couple of rentals. Kind of like the burr. In the beginning, there's a whole bunch of things you need to learn, right? I wouldn't want to put my primary residence at risk until I knew that I was going to get a return on my home equity line of credit. So I'm not opposed to it. I don't think it's the best strategy to start with, especially right now where a lot of people have gained a lot of equity because we've had massive appreciation. Appreciation can disappear. And getting the property that cash flows in a market that's as competitive as this one is less likely for the newer investor because you have so much to learn. And we do make most of our mistakes in those first few investments. So I wouldn't recommend starting with that. But once you have some, Matt the Lumberjack Landlord and Michael Zuber almost had me talked into. I have a paid off property, 6 properties with mortgages. They had a really good strategy several months ago where they refinanced and took out a bunch of money to have it sitting there for the deals that are going to pop up as interest rates go up and what's going to happen in the next year. Peer pressure almost had me do a cash out refinance on that house. I didn't. I resisted the peer pressure. It made sense. It made the most logical sense if I was trying to scale the number of units the way that they are. But I like the financial stability. And Michael Zuber actually said he has some paid off properties too. So based on the size of your portfolio and your goals, there's different ways for everybody. There's no one right way to invest in real estate. There's a one right way for you, but it might not be the same as everyone else's. So I think using your equity in a HELOC makes sense, but I wouldn't do it for your first or maybe even second rental property until you have enough of the basics down to where you're confident in your ability to get a return and run a business that's actually going to let you make a payment on the debt that you're creating on the asset you already own. Um, where was I in my chats? Here we go. Keith, a house and a duplex on one property just listed for break even, not including taxes and insurance and maintenance. Alligator will eat you alive. Yeah, most of that single family houses I see are alligators, and a lot of the small multifamily that I've seen for the last year are alligators. Um, finding one that isn't is the trick. And then a lot of people are chasing numbers that don't make sense. And as an investor, most investors look at that and think, why would they buy that? They're going to lose money. But we're looking at it as though we're paying the down payment. Some investors are taking a down payment on a smaller property and rolling a 1031 into that property. So in their mind, they're investing a lot less money to get to where they're at. So the numbers that we're seeing are never going to be the numbers that another investor is going to see because we don't know their whole story. Keith, the Zoomster is correct. Know your market. Absolutely. Rents in my area have gone stupid. I think they've gone stupid in my area too, and I don't know how much more we're going to see, but it's crazy. I know friends and family who are looking for places to rent that are probably going to have to move. They just can't afford to be in the area, and then that's it. Rents are affordable somewhere for people. But as rents grow in an area, it's supply and demand. And we're seeing a lot of this. We can work from a distance, so we don't have to live where work is anymore. And so areas, in King County, where Seattle was, where there's a lot of the bigger companies, rents being high was kind of expected. Pierce and Thurston County, rents weren't usually that high. Well, now people that are moving there, they've doubled the rents in 2 years, literally doubled. 2 and 3 bedrooms that were going for 11 to 1300 are going for 25 and 2700 for 4 bedrooms in just 2 years. And when we list one, I help my friend list one, and she has a tenant moving out, so we'll be listing another. There's a line of qualified applicants. As long as there's a line of qualified applicants, rents are not coming down. So yeah, it's weird. Michael, great explanation. Thank you. I'll be sure to check your video out. Thank you. Chester, I'm in the system learning and setup phase, so I'm still figuring out how everything should look once it's all set up. You'd mentioned a few places you go to check average rents. What were they? So someone asked me this the other day. Setting rent seems more like an art than a science. There's a video on my channel, Setting Rents in a Hot Market. There will come a time when I can't remember the names of the videos on my channel because I'm just hitting the 200 mark. But I'm still small enough to know the ones that I consider like lessons. Yeah. I used to look at Rentometer and call the housing authority because they were pretty good at being spot on for area average rents. And I would do a 5% increase every other year for existing tenants. In 2020 and 2021, rents skyrocketed so fast, those methods don't work. They use historical data. They look at the last year and they come up with an average. Rentometer even switched to the quarter and come up with an average, and it's still $200 to $400 behind area average rents. The way that I look at rents is I try to currently, like I was looking for a place myself, I go to Craigslist, apartments.com, Facebook Marketplace, and I look for a rental, the same number of bedrooms, as close to the same area as possible. And I see what would I be paying now. I have to do the work every time. So that's another one of the reasons why it's fairly easy for me fairly simple, not easy, simple for me to invest in 2 counties. I can track the area average rents by checking those 3 sources every week or two. If I was looking at 3 different states with different counties, you're talking, it's a Googleplex. It starts to be 30 different sources, and each couple of weeks, too much work. So that's why you want to pick a footprint you can handle. So those are the ways I look for the area average rents. Keith, how do starters get pre-approval letter with no assets? There are first-time buyer programs that are actually incentives to help people buy. An FHA loan will let first-time and existing owners buy with a worse debt-to-income ratio and a worse credit score. When you have no assets, first-time buyers, you have the debt-to-income ratio to qualify for a certain amount. You can usually buy a primary and a rental. Beyond that, it's really hard to scale until you hit those 2 years. Once you hit the 2 years with rental income on your tax returns, it gets a lot easier. So it's a protection because the banks don't know if you're a safe bet or not. You haven't proven that you have the systems in place to run a successful business, so they don't want to lend you a bunch of money on a bunch of different properties until you show 2 years. Then they actually want to lend you money. So the first 2 years are the hardest for that new investor. But there are things like first time buyers. Bank of America has a thing where they'll do it $17,500 in a program towards your down payment with Bank of America to get you on the property ladder as a new investor. Conventional loans, if you've never owned a home before, it's only 3% down. If you haven't owned a home, if you have owned a home in the last 3 years, it's 5% down to do owner occupied. So if you're going to live into it, it's a lot easier. If you're doing as an investment property, the criteria gets a little bit stricter. But what we do is so the order of operations to get started, first, we learn how to save. So that's increasing your income, lowering your expenses, or automating it. Get your credit score above 740 if possible, but you want to be above 600. The higher you get it, just the better rates and terms and fees you're going to get. And then the third thing, before we've talked to an agent, is talk to a lender. A lender will tell you what your options are and some things that you can do to help improve your odds. Sometimes it's pay this credit card off, that'll help, or show your salary is 50,000 and you've made 70,000, right? But we need to see consistent overtime, so tax returns to show that overtime, not more than your salary. They'll tell you something that you can do to make yourself more bankable, but it's unique to each one of us. That's why step 3, before we talk to an agent, is to find out what a lender would lend to us. And I like to start with a bigger lender like Wells Fargo, Bank of America, one of the traditional banks, because they have the most standardized criteria. If you go to a local credit union, they're a little more creative. So you might not know what you're going to qualify for someone else. But if you qualify for Wells Fargo or Bank of America or Chase or one of those kind of banks, you can pretty much with confidence go to any other lender and you're going to qualify for that much or more. It's rare that you would then go to someone like Guild Mortgage or Fairway Mortgage and they say, oh, we're going to only lend you less. So that's the order of operations on lending. Carrie, can you talk about how the adjustable rates work on a home equity line of credit? Yes, but not today. I need to do some research on home equity lines of credits because I know that they have adjustable rates, but there's different structures. And they'll have things like, a 1-5-10 or a 5-10 or whatever. I don't know what those numbers no, I don't know what they mean right now with confidence enough to give actual information, but I'm going to make a video. That's a good suggestion on how a home equity line of credit works. I'll probably do it with the three amigos. So that'll probably be a topic for Thursday. It'll come out on Michael Zuber's channel on how a home equity line of credit works. I've actually been cheating lately. Sometimes I want to make a video and I think, okay, I could do 3 days of research and figure the chronology out for this outline to make this retainable. 3 things that you can learn, because when we get the 4th thing, we don't lose the 4th one, we lose all 4, like structure this, edit the video and everything. Or I have 2 friends who've been investing for over 20 years that are way smarter than me, that just know stuff. And then I can have a 10-minute conversation and make a video. Is that cheating? Abdul Mateen, howdy. So, Dion, how important is yield on a property that is paid off and has already repaid everything back that was invested in it? So, there's a big difference between, it's a great question, cash on cash return versus cash on equity return. I have a paid off property. I'm getting an amazing cash on cash return. When I decided to pay it off, I owed $121,000. That's when I turned my house into a rental. It's cash flowing now. So the rent's coming in every month or $2,200. There's $200 for taxes and insurance. I set aside $200 for maintenance. So I'm cash flowing $1,800 a month in profit. So cash on cash return is a lot. Like it's really good. Cash on equity, I could sell that property for 400,000, or I could do a cash out refinance for 300 and something thousand, 330 or whatever the math is for 75%. It's 300,000. My brain sucks. So I could take a $300,000 mortgage out and put that money to work. I could be getting $30,000 a year instead of 20,000 or 21,000 or whatever the math is on that. So I would get more money if I sold it, or more money if I cashed out and put the money to work. But I have a paid off asset that is cash flowing. Cash on cash return is phenomenal. Cash on equity return is not great, but it's part of my overall portfolio to keep me stable. It's a swan account, sleep well at night, helps me sleep well at night. And it makes it easier to buy other properties with less leverage and have an overall leverage position under where I want it. So I would do the math. What is your cash on cash? You've already paid it off. And did you pay it off, or did a tenant pay it off over years? Because then it's not money out of your own pocket. What did you invest into the property to get your cash on cash return? Whether it was closing costs, down payment, immediate repairs, or if you decided to pay off the mortgage in chunks like I did. Versus, what could you get if you took the money from the asset and redeployed it? If you could get a 10% return, and you can deploy. If I can deploy $400,000, if I sold it and redeployed 400,000, I would have selling costs. I'd be doing a 1031 to avoid capital gains, but I could put in, $40,000 income if I redid that. So mathematically, it usually would make more sense to cash out or to sell the asset. But is that the best use? And the most important question, whenever it comes to do I take money out of an asset, is what would I do with it? Could I find the deal? Especially for a 1031, you have a timeline you have to stick to. Could I find a deal in that window? Hard decision to make. Christine, howdy. In Florida, that sounds like a real place. In Florida, the vacancy is 17% and the rents are going up. What do you think is causing this? Influx of implants from expensive cities. It looks like it'll flatline with the imbalance. So at some point, the rents would stop going up. You are seeing people who are used to paying more from other areas where they had to work moving here, but you're also seeing a population increase because of political views where people want to avoid states that don't feel the way they do about a vaccine or taxes, and they move to a state like Florida or Arizona. And so an influx of population means less rentals. But you say that the vacancy rate is 17%. That data is something I would question. The vacancy rate in Washington state is 5%. I've never seen a vacancy. I don't know any investor who owns properties who's ever seen a vacancy in 10 years. My brother in three years, 3 sets of 10 years, 3 decades. Makes sense of my words. But they say it's 5%, I believe, because apartment complexes have higher turnover and they might have some places vacant. But small multifamily and single family houses, there's a list. Like right now, there's a list of over 10 people waiting for one of my places to open who constantly reach out to ask when one is opening. I still set aside 5% for vacancy because during a vacancy, you have the cost of the turnover. So I'll have that eventually. But I would look at Florida, try to rent a place right now. I have a friend here that was trying to find a place. They were literally trying to find a place for their daughter. We're going to find a place for her to rent. They bought one. That was the only way to find a place that she could rent. So 17%, I think, would hit large multifamily, but study your market. I don't know Florida. I'm talking, words are wind, just from my one experience with my friend here. Let me make sure I got to the rest of your question. Think rents are going up. I think rents are going up because people are moving from more expensive areas. Implants, transplants, right? Um, but a ton of people are moving out of California. I mean, they tabulated hundreds of thousands in the last 2 years, and rents are going up in California. What sets rents is wage inflation. We are seeing record wage inflation. And if anybody says, well, I'm not seeing that at my company, that's because you're at your company. The biggest way to get the biggest increase is to change companies. If a company will do a 3 to 5% annual increase, you could probably get a 10 to 20% increase by going to a competitor. So changing jobs is the way to increase your wage. And a ton of people are doing that. We had what's called the, is it mass resignation? There's something resignation, where a bunch of people in November, December, and January, over 4 million people resigned their jobs. Not 4 million total. 4 million in November, 4 million in December, 4 million in January. We have one of the lowest unemployment rates ever. Right? It's under 4%. So people aren't quitting their jobs and just not working. They're changing jobs. Places like McDonald's was paying $50 for people to just show up for an interview, and places like Chick-fil-A and for entry-level positions. So we're seeing that record wage inflation. So you're going to see rents double or more because of wage inflation. And then people are moving because it's not just rents are going up in Florida. Rents are going up in places where population is decreasing. Wage inflation is a huge factor. Ronald, howdy. Thanks to you, Zuber and Lumberjack, I acquired my first rental. I have enough square footage to also build an ADU in the backyard. When would you suggest a good time to build an ADU since I'm new? Okay, so you're new. I don't know that there's a timeline on investing, like wait 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, or a year or whatever. Lenders will have seasoning periods on certain things before you can do a cash out refinance or that kind of thing. But when it comes to an ADU, it's going to come down to your debt to income ratio. And first, congratulations, that's awesome. How much can you borrow to do it? Is your municipality on board with ADUs, or are they going to fight you on it? So I would go check with the city. And the first step is usually plans for an ADU. You can do all of that before you really make a commitment. The plans might end up costing you several thousand. So find out how the process works before you get the plans. I have a friend who paid $7,000 for the plans for a duplex. And then the city said, you can't do a duplex here, after they already said he could. So it went on hold for 9 months. And then the city came back and said, actually, we're going to let you do a duplex. I don't know what we were thinking. So find out who runs it in your municipality and see what kind of commitment you can get from them. I would do it as soon as your finances justify it. Talk to a lender to figure out what they'll require. We have supply chain issues, and price of materials are going up and down. So I don't know that there's a way to time that right. I'm not going to say, oh, if you wait a year and supply chain issues will be fixed. I don't know that that's true. People said that all of 2020, and 2021 was worse. So sooner the better would be my vote. Michael says, congrats. Raj, howdy. The three amigos, you love it. Carrie, are you only looking at multifamily, or would you consider single family? I have searches set up for both. I've just never seen a single family that even came close to making sense. Single family in my area, $450,000, would rent for $2,000 a month. A duplex in my area, $450,000. Each side rents out for $2,000 a month. It just doesn't make sense to buy single family in my area. But if I found one that did, the Burr properties I'm looking at are single family. I'm looking for under 300,000 that need a ton of work. I don't care how much work it needs, and then I'll probably use my own money because it's the one I'm saving up for the down payment for the next investment, or Burr, whichever one I find first. Those I've been looking at single family. Haven't found one of those yet either. So it depends on the area. I love how Michael Zuber says it. I look at the yield. He takes it a step further than me. He looks at the yield and he buys the one that makes the most sense mathematically. I eliminate multifamily, 5 units or more, because I don't have 10 mortgages in my name Michael Zuber is already past that. He's into commercial loans. So when he does a loan, he's getting commercial lending. So to him, it doesn't matter. Single family, small multifamily, or 10plex, they're all the same to him. For me, single family or small multifamily up to 4 units, I get 30-year fixed rate residential loans, and I can do in my own name, and I can house hack if I want to. Um, so, yield. Which one has the best return? That's the one I'm buying. Lumberjack landlord. Do you regret not getting a mortgage or HELOC on the house you own outright now? That rates are much higher. And that is a great question. And the answer, and honestly, because I know I want to be sarcastic because I'm talking to you, Matt. No. Um, I don't know how to talk these kind of numbers without sounding like I'm bragging. So this is me trying to apologize for doing well. I purchased a duplex in May of 2021, closed on it, dropped down to 35 or so thousand dollars in the bank account because that was my reserves. It was what the bank required, and it was my down payment. So it's almost a year. There's, I should open the banking app. There's like $340,000 sitting in an account now that I need to find a place to put to work. If I took out a home equity line of credit or a HELOC on that property, not only would I have the payments every month, but then I would have six or $700,000 that I haven't found a home for, that I'm losing to appreciation or losing to inflation on. And I'm already losing, at 7% with 300,000. I lost $21,000 in a year to inflation. So here's the weirdest thing I never thought I would say ever in my life. I'm glad I don't have more money. I'm very happy that I have a paid off house that's cash flowing $1,800 a month. Like, that makes me sleep like a baby. If I took that money out and it was cash flowing $500 a month, still positive, still great, and had all this money in the bank that I was losing value on, I'd lose my hair. And I like it. I'd be hunting for that next deal to look for a place to put that money to work. So no, as much as I appreciate, steel sharpens steel. You and Mike making me better and pushing for me to do a refinance. I'm actually kind of glad I didn't. Yeah. How do you say numbers like that without sounding like you're bragging? Like I'm failing at finding a place to put money to work. So that's not bragging. But interest rates are much higher, so I wouldn't do it now. And then Murph Dog took a message back. Chester, the great resignation. Thank you. That's exactly what it was. Raj, Dion, you have so much intelligence and charisma. Thank you. I'll agree with one of those. I think I'm cute. I think I'm adorable. It's one of my favorite supernatural quotes. Thank you, though, Raj. Danielle, howdy. Hi, Dion. What is some of the criteria you seek in choosing your rental area? So, what is the order? Because I know there's math, then physical aspects of the property, then physical aspects. So it goes math, location, property. So that's the order of operations for choosing a property for me. Math. I want to get my yield. Currently, for the last 10 years, I've looked for 10% or better yield, but I'm watching rates, prices, and rents to where if area average ever went up or down, I would adjust to where I'm above that sum. So if it goes down to 8, 7, 6, 5, I'm going to be down 10, 9, 8. Right now, I'm looking for a 10% or better yield. So if I can find a market where the yield is that, and what I've done for that is 2 counties, and I'll be transparent, Pierce and Thurston counties in Washington State, small multifamily. I'm not able to find that yield in single family, and I don't do multifamily, but small multifamily, I've been able to find that yield. So the first thing is math. Second thing is area. I want an area where there's at least 2, so 2 or more economic drivers, sources of tenants. I wouldn't want to open up in a town like me personally, as much as beautiful as Port Angeles, Washington is. You had the mills at the port, and there really wasn't much else out there as far as businesses go. So the mills shut down, and a lot of the jobs go away. Rents go flat for 20 years. I want a base, a port, a college, a hospital, Boeing or Amazon or some kind of big company that has terminals or hubs, or, and this is an economic driver in itself, a population of 100,000 or more. So if I can have at least 2 of those, so it could be a a population and a base. So big population outside the base. Port and a base, a port and a population. They didn't have the population in port. So I want those. And then it's physical aspects of the property. I like small multifamily, but I don't like over unders because you have noise complaints from tenants. So a plumbing issue in one can affect two tenants. So I want side by side units. I prefer garages in the middle so you don't actually have any shared living space. I want washer dryer hookups in the units because tenants don't like to use shared laundry or laundromats. They're just waiting for a place to open that has it. I also like to have 2 bedrooms and a garage or more for each side because that means more space, which means more stuff, which means less likely to move. I like places that are pet friendly. So I prefer, when possible, fenced yards. I could fence it if I had to. So it's in the cost to acquire if I was going to add that. So that's the order of operations. Yield, physical, I call them economic drivers, sources of tenants, and then aspects of the. I don't think I missed anything there. Hope that helps. I've never looked up employment rates. As long as it's got multiple companies and there's not just one, then I'm not too worried about it. But one of the reasons I like to be around something like a base or a hospital is because you couldn't shift 2 traveling nurses. I keep about 1/3 of my tenants from the military, and I like 1/3 Section 8 and then 1/3 working or retired. And it would be illegal to advertise saying I only want military or I only want Section 8. But I can control how I advertise. And if I want a military tenant, I advertise on the base. I don't say military only. I just advertise on base. And who do you think I'm going to get? If I call the housing authority and I say, hey, next Tuesday, I've got a unit coming available. Here's the link. Share it with your clients. Who do you think I'm going to get? Same thing. So I kind of diversify my tenant base after that. So the idea is I have a portfolio in an area where I get the money that I want, the yield. There's enough economic drivers to where in my area, 5 or 6 catastrophic things would have to happen. A BRAC, base realignment enclosure, so JBLM would go away. Boeing and Amazon would have to pull out. Costco would have to move away. The port would have to shut down. Like all of these things would have to go in a cascade to start to impact my rents. And then I diversify the tenant base to where when a pandemic, prolonged government shutdown, or stock market crash happens, only 1/3 of my tenants are going to be impacted. I sleep like a baby, and not the one that wakes up screaming every couple of hours. Literally, I mean, just sleep like a baby. I have no financial worries at all. And the only thing that ever concerns me financially, and it's one of the reasons why I try to make content like this, is when I go anywhere and I see somebody trapped in their job. You see somebody working at Lowe's that's in their 60s, or a waiter or waitress in their 60s, and the haping at work. It hurts to get up and go to work every day, and they're still there stuck because we were told that that's what you do. You go to work until you die, basically. So I'm trying to help with the other content creators that I work with to show that there is a different way to do this. I'll move chat, and I'm glad the chat moved. That meant more people are asking questions, which I really appreciate. Corey, do you expect landlords will be labeled as evil by the media? Not soon, Corey. That's a brilliant question. Like, you're tracking 100%. It's already happened. Business Insider came out with some articles about Michael Zuber and Matt the Lumberjack Landlord, and then they just released their 3rd one on me. And I'm super happy to be featured because it means more people might find the content, how to buy one rental at a time, how to make work optional in 10 years or less, how to, even if they're not starting from the best position, like literally learn these things and get on the property ladder, make work optional. The world is just a better place if people can work jobs that they want to instead of jobs that they have to. Like, that there will be people who better from this. But there are subreddit groups. They're literally calling for my execution. And that's the nicest thing they had to say. Thousands, pluralize that, thousands of comments talking about how bad capitalism is, how bad landlords are, how evil landlords are. So we're going to be making some targeted videos in the next few weeks. Me and Lumberjack Landlord, who they attacked him just as much. Literally a picture of his family talking about a 9th grade dropout, supporting his family and providing housing for over 100 families. and he gets attacked, we're labeled as evil because there's the movement for housing should be a right, and it should be provided by the government. And we see how awesome everything goes when the government provides it, right? Go to the Department of Licensing, renew your license. Tell me how that experience goes. Look on all the walls. There's signs that say it is a felony to threaten our staff because they're that bad at what they do. Um, yeah, we are labeled as horrible, evil people um, already. So it's not that it's going to be soon, but you nailed it 100%. Lumberjack landlord, Florida vacancy rate is 5.4. So similar to Washington's, but again, I've never seen one. I had two tenant turnovers. One, the place was empty for 4 days. It was really hard to get everything done in that amount of time, and there were several applicants that wanted it. The other one, uh, tenant was moving out, gave me about a month. Didn't even want reimbursed. They just said we're going to be in a month. We don't know when we'll get out. So they got out and had almost a full month to get ready. 4 hours, 12 applicants were qualified for that place. So I've never actually had a gap in that. And I know that's a concern when we're a new renter. We're always, what if someone trashes our place? What if they don't pay the rent? What if I can't find a tenant? And the concerns are somebody is going to trash your place. Plan for it and have reserves for it. What if they stop paying your rent? Know the eviction laws in your area, have reserves for it. And I keep an attorney on retainer, even though I've never gone through an eviction. I give them $1,500. It's sitting there in an account to ever do any kind of letter servicing that I need to. And then I just know that that'll be handled professionally. And then third, it's never, what if I can't find a tenant? It's worst case, from the goal of the rent that I want to get, how much lower might I possibly have to lower it to get a tenant in today? There is a number somewhere in there that will make sense. So it's not a time thing, it's an amount thing. Chester to Corey. Never. The people who own the 6 major media companies all own massive real estate portfolios. Interesting thought. Yeah. So it's kind of like laws should never change against landlords because most of the people and all the people in Congress own properties. But there are some people in office pushing for some absolutely ridiculous laws. There was a law, a bill, not a law, it's a bill submitted. And I need to find this because I want to make this video, but I don't want to be looked at like a political channel because I don't have a left or a right. I don't care. But this person submitted a bill saying tenants should own part of the property for paying rent. They didn't save the down payment. They didn't get the credit score. They didn't get the work history. They didn't take any of the risks. They're not paying for any of the repairs that can come up in the future, but they should own part of the property. So there is people in office who think things like that. But the majority of people in Congress are property owners. So most of the laws that come out support property owners. I normally don't get text during my live stream, so I want to make sure it's nobody like. Okay, it was somebody important, but it's not work related. Where was I? Danielle, how do you feel about properties? Danielle, how do you come with tenants versus starting over with choosing this? And is this an opinion to be able to renovate a property? Most investors that I've ever heard of want to buy an empty property. So most sellers want to list a property that's empty because you want to get the most eyes on it. I prefer to buy already occupied properties. After that, I'll take a rent-ready property. In 10 years of investing, I've never purchased a property that needed a rehab. I know that Matt, the lumberjack landlord, has done that, and he's got a ton of videos and a great information to tell you how to do that. I work full-time, run a nonprofit, do 30 hours a week on YouTube, still have 3 kids, and sometimes I want to have a life like this month or 2 that I'm going to spend down here doing scuba, just hanging out in Florida. I have my strategy, the binder strategy, which gets my tenants to request a rent increase. So I can get the rents to just below area average with confidence because I haven't had it not happen yet. Tenants that are in properties there's some really simple things that I can do. I go in and I put in coated locks and I replace exterior lights, the porch lights, with motion sensor LED lights. It's less power for the tenant. They're brighter, provides more safety. And then I ask the tenant if there's anything that they would like fixed. And so far, it's always been really simple things like add a screen door or fix a ceiling fan, and just really simple things. And then the tenants are happy, and they're happy to raise their rents. So I've only had two tenant turnovers the whole time I've been investing, and that was because one passed away and one inherited a house. So I understand why they don't live there anymore. Um, for me, it's easy to retain tenants. I mean, it's easy for me to get the yield that I want. No, it's not easy. It's simple. I keep using those words wrong. It's simple for me. It's not complicated. So that there are more properties for me to look at because a lot of investors want an empty property. A lot of sellers will actually say things like, I don't want to sell because I'm afraid the tenant will get kicked out. I was in a mastermind, the Seattle Investors Club. Their masterminds are put up on YouTube, I think, like a week or two after it. So last week, and when there was a ethical landlord trying to have what do you call them, emotions, but kidding. He cares about his tenants. He needs to financially. It makes sense for him to sell a property. But his concern is that tenant's been in there for a long time, and he knows that if he sells, either the rents are going to get jacked up or they're going to get kicked out. So he was asking the mastermind, how do I solve or how do I handle this situation? Um, so there are sellers that you can actually say, what matters to you, like Matt the Lumberjack Landlord's strategy. And if the seller goes, my intent is to not uh, kick the tenant out, not get the tenant's rent just jacked up to where they can't afford it, literally tell that, here's my plan. I like to buy already occupied properties because I don't like tenant turnover. I don't want to do a rehab. I don't want to kick them out. I am going to raise the rents, but here's how I'm going to do it. And then I would teach them how the binder method works. And I would say, so if there's any kind of rent increase, it's going to be with the tenant involved in the conversation, with what they're comfortable with, and that they know that they can handle. I would alleviate the seller's biggest concern to make the deal. If you want to do a renovation and get the area best rents and have that expense and have that gap time to do the thing, and you have the time to manage a contractor, it's probably mathematically the best format to get an empty property, fix it up, rent it out. Simplest to do while working full time with least amount of disruption. I don't have to screen a tenant, find a tenant, place a tenant, get anything. I'm going to do a binder strategy 2 months after having my handyman fix a couple of simple things. That's always my preferred method. I will buy an empty, but I have bought a couple places that were empty. I don't like it. I like to buy with tenants in. There might be a reason why other people are doing it their way, and that the majority of people do it that way. If you live in an area with rent control, that would change my decision. I live in Washington State. I invest in Washington State. We currently don't have rent control. Outside of Seattle, we don't have a version of rent control at all. So I can use my strategy there. If I lived in California or someplace where it had rent control, I might invest in something that wasn't impacted by rent control. Some areas that have rent control don't affect single family. They don't affect small multifamily if you're house hacking. So I would use a house hacking. So there's a few ways to learn your local laws to find the way that works there. But if you just flat out have rent control, then I would be looking for empty places because, yes, you want to set the area rents to area, and rent control forces an owner to do the maximum allowable increase every year, or you could quickly fall behind. Corey, to Matt, why are you not watching the Bruins game? I'm guessing Bruins is one of those sports ball teams, right? Probably has its two teams. Ronald, thanks, Michael. Lumberjack, Corey, I am watching this on my phone, Bruins on the big screen. I do the same thing on Sunday mornings when I watch. I have a mandate with a friend, and we usually pick a series of something old and we watch it. And currently we're going through the entire Stargate series. So we're literally watching Stargate with Lumberjack Landlord in my ear on Sunday. So I do the same thing for his. North Cal, howdy. Not a rental question, but curious. What would you to fix the economy? Inflation, shortages, fuel, housing. What top 3 things your point of view would have the greatest impact? Okay, so that isn't a rental question. I get it. So I'll keep this as brief as possible for the people who did come here for rental information. I talked about it in one video, and I have a very unpopular opinion. I actually have a bet with Lumberjack Landlord and Michael Zuber that interest rates are going to go up. The government is going to realize that this inflation was not caused by low um, interest rates. So they're going to then quickly reduce interest rates again to help the economy. I think I got the timing wrong. I said that it would happen by the end of 2022. We'd be interest rates below 3.5% or lower. And so I'm probably going to lose $1 to each of them. So expect a shadow boxed dollar floating in the background of their sets here pretty soon. Well, by the end of this year. So I think that's still going to happen, just over a little bit longer timeline, because low rates did not cause inflation this time. We had a world shutdown, but you have the first time in history where we have the strongest consumer confidence. People will buy anything right now for the last 2 years, because I grew up and spent most of my adult life in a time thinking, if there's a pandemic or a war or a stock market crash, people will lose their houses like 2008 and 2000. Hang on. We're just going to give everybody unemployment. Let's extend that basically infinitely until we decide to stop this when this emergency is over. So it didn't get 26 weeks to 52. It literally said until this problem is over. And then since unemployment isn't a lot in some states, we're going to add to that. So in Washington State, a person on unemployment was making $75,000 a year on their couch. Then we had, let's give some stimulus and some child tax credit too. So we're going to print $120 billion a month. So we flood the market. This creates inflation, not low interest rates like has happened in the past. So people had to be bribed to come back to work. McDonald's, I said earlier, was giving $50 for anybody who would just show up for an interview. Chick-fil-A is starting people at $18 an hour for an entry-level position. Our company had to do 5% increases in less than a 9-month period. We're looking at doing another one. We're trying to, as soon as we can find where the money would come from within the next 6 months, to retain and hopefully attract staff. Record wage inflation is happening to get people to come back to work. Inflation is happening because of wage inflation. If people can relocate from an expensive area to a not expensive area because they don't have to work close to work, they can work at home and homeschool now, rents are going to double and triple. People in that area are going to start making more money, not because the people are making more money, but because the people that move there with their higher salaries from other places can live there. So here's the thing that would fix the economy, and nobody's going to like it. There are some states with this, but we need a federal version of a wage cap. And no one likes to hear that. Wages set rents. Wages set car prices. Wages set prices for vacations. Wages set the prices for everything, and that's where this inflation is coming from. We need to make sure we stop stimulus, we stop extended unemployment, we stop extra unemployment, we stop anything that takes a person out of the workplace and gives them an option to get paid not to work. If they invest and they take money and they put it to work in something that provides value, if you're investing in stocks, those businesses provide value. If you're investing in crypto and that crypto gets more demand because it's useful for something, you're creating value. If you invest in real estate and you provide housing, storage, commercial, something that's providing value and you're getting paid for it, sure, you don't need to work. We make work optional by becoming financially independent. If we make work optional because people just get paid, then money has no value and inflation is going to keep going. So that's as unpolitical as I can get and as much time as I'll spend off of real estate. But I still worked it into real estate there. So now you see why I get attacked on Reddit when I say, well, if you don't want things to go up and cost more, stop paying people more, because that's going to make things cost more. You can't use logic in some areas. Lumberjack landlord, nice, great answer on HELOC. Cool. And then Dawn took a message back. I will always wonder, I will lose sleep. Sean can shine. Howdy. You watched Supernatural before it was cool, hipster. I read that Supernatural season 1 and 2 were very popular with the armed forces. Is that true? It came out after I got out in the military, back when Christ was a corporal. So I got out after Desert Storm. Supernatural came out after that. I can imagine it's popular with the military. The magic trick that they pulled off is they got girls interested in a show that has two hot guys and somehow got guys interested in it too. Like how do you get both of the two genders interested in the show? Um, okay, and audio is working for you. Thank you. Aaron, howdy. Why did you evict me and my two children from our duplex? I was only behind 17 months on the rent. Well, I don't know that you would have made it 17 months in my place. Um, First off, anybody who's been evicted in the last 2 years means you didn't apply for uh, rent relief in the first version of it, because there was $46 billion set aside for rent relief. And then the second thing, they changed it to where even the landlord can request it. So throughout the entire pandemic, I actually still haven't had a later missing payment. I did have two tenants reach out and apply for rent relief and got 2 months each paid, which was weird to me because I just got a check for 2 months out of nowhere. And then then I had to tell the tenants, hey, you got to prove for something. So you're getting 2 months off of rent. Um, it's only 17 months behind on rent. It's 7 days. The process has started. Chester. North Cal, not a magic bullet per se, but demand way outstrips supply. Problem. You could also watch Michael Zuber's morning show on this channel, one rental at a time. Okay, Dawn took another message out. You're really messing with me. You're gonna make my hair fall out. Chester, he's an economist and is good at looking at the consumer. Yeah, so if you have that question, ask it of Michael Zuber on one rental at a time. He does lives every morning at 7:30, except for Thursdays. He does at 7 to accommodate his guest, but he doesn't generally answer questions during the week. Saturday mornings, 8 a.m. Pacific Standard, he does about an hour or so, about 50 minutes of a live stream where he actually goes through and answers questions like this. Yeah, and I think because 30 or so, maybe even some more times people show up, that this is a good format. I like the live streams because I like how a question sparks a whole topic to go over that I wouldn't know to make a video on. But I'll do these until people can stop showing up. But I show up for Matt's and Mike's too, because I learn from the questions that people ask and then listen to their answer. Questions I wouldn't even know to ask. And you're right, Michael Zuber has a master's degree in economics. And I'm just sitting over here with this PhD, public high school diploma. So, which is never, the only thing it ever did for me is it let me get into the Marine Corps. It's the only time I've ever used it for anything. So, North Cal, thank you, Chester. Raj, I would give my life to save you. Nice. Thank you. Me too. I signed that contract, tried to give my life for 6 years. Phil, you three are the nicest evils I know. Thank you for all's help. Awesome. Thank you. Chester, it's easier to blame others for our misery than it is for us to take the difficult step of fixing ourselves and our own situation. Very much so. And referencing the situation about the people who are calling for harm to others, of course. Yep. Christine, how do you minimize risk when buying a property with existing tenants to avoid squatting or destroying your property before you get a chance to introduce the binder method? Great question. First is reserves. Second, and this is something I haven't really put into a video yet, but we talked in my, I have a Three Amigos video about a week ago on the classes of neighborhood, A, B, C, or D. There's a bell curve. A is super expensive and usually doesn't cash flow in a lot of areas. Joe Asamoah is able to make the 5+ bedrooms cash flow in the DC area because he uses Section 8, and the more bedrooms, they actually pay enough for Class A areas to cash flow. And then you have D, war zone kind of areas where the cops can't go by themselves. So there's a bell curve where Lumberjack and me and kind of Mike all said we want to invest in the middle. So we're the most likely to be profitable. The most number of tenants in an economic downturn, people might move from A to B or C. And when things are good, they might move from D to B or C. So you have more people trying for your property. So that's how we do that, right? I prefer Class C properties because I don't want a very expensive property to where if it's empty, I'm carrying a $3,000 or $4,000 mortgage. If I have a duplex where the mortgage is $1,300, I'm okay with one side or maybe even both not paying for a month or two. That's why my reserves handle that. So the more expensive property I have, the bigger my reserves would be. When you're buying a property, add to your reserves, know your local laws, learn the timeline on what an eviction is there and what would qualify for an eviction. So if you're in a place like California that keeps extending the federally regulated, it was the federally, they decided the eviction moratorium was unconstitutional, but California keeps extending it. I might go for more reserves. The way I look at it is if a tenant is underpaying on rent, and let's say they have a long lease left, so I can't use the binder strategy till their current lease ends. That amount of rent that I could have take that aggregate it together, consider it a part of my cost to acquire. So if I could have got another $200 a month every month, and my lease is going to go for 8 months, I'm going to add $1,600 to my cost to acquire. If it still gets me the return that I want, then I still go through with the purchase. If it doesn't, then I move on. I keep an attorney on record, and I have not had any problems with tenants not paying. A lot of times, tenants are upset with their landlord, not their living situation. Uh, Another one of the reasons why I prefer small multifamily that's spread out is my tenants don't generally interact with each other. I don't know that I have any that know each other. If you buy a 10-unit apartment complex together and 5 of them decide to do a rent strike and the other 5 are like, well, I'm not going to be the only 50% paying the rent, you're going to have a lot of problems. So diversifying by having my properties out. I like buying properties that have some 1 or 2 of the units Section 8 because that's guaranteed income, which helps offset. So if I buy a duplex and the mortgage is 1,300 and each side is rented out for 1,800, if I have one paying, I'm happy. Uh, my duplex where that's the case, it's like 1380 and 18 and 16. So it's not quite always that good, but it can be that good. So diversified tenant basis, diversified properties, large reserves, um, and good communication skills. And then have an attorney on retainer. If you have the $1,500 sitting with the attorney, your eviction is probably going to cost you like $700. You're going to have, depending on the timeline, in my area, it's about 2 to 4 months, depending on the type of eviction you're going to go through. And know your local laws. If they want to make a partial payment, don't accept it because that starts the timeline all over for the eviction, even if they only pay a small amount. Yeah, so that's how I mitigate the risk on that. Chester, applied knowledge or wisdom is the most powerful asset we can get. Applied financial intelligence is the name of the game to get to financial intelligence and ultimately find independence and ultimately financial freedom. I agree. So that's the really cool thing with learning this information. If you're on a live stream and you're taking in information, it's pointless unless you do something. And doing something doesn't mean, hey, go buy a rental or I think you're failing. What does your savings rate look like? Have you looked into ways to increase your income? Have you looked at ways to control your expenses? And I personally don't like the latte factor, like eliminating the small things. I have every streaming service there is. I eat out all the time. So I don't think about getting rid of small expenses. I got rid of housing. And then I buy paid off vehicles. So I have an account where I'm setting aside. I bought a property that when I first bought it was cash flowing a little over $780 a month. That was my vehicle duplex. It's now cash flowing almost $1,500 a month. So the next vehicle is going to be an interesting. I don't think I'm going to do the Lambo like Matt does, but it'll be something interesting. North Colorado Dawn. Since you only have a single savings account for CapEx and investing funds, do you have a spreadsheet to show how much you have for CapEx down payment, or do you just have a set amount for CapEx? It's mentally just a number. When I had 7 units or less, 10,000 of that account was my zero for emergencies. Now it's 30 while I'm working. If I ever stop working, I'm going to probably double that, or maybe at least take it to 50 and leave it there. But it's just in my head. There's no spreadsheet. I know that's my reserves. When I go to qualify for a mortgage, the lender's going to want to know where my reserves are, and I'll be able to show the account and say, look, this is how much money is in that account. and Dawn. Then the rest is whatever comes up. Yeah, it's whatever comes up. You're trying to simplify your accounting. I'm getting lazy in my old age. So I do have the spreadsheet that says what my expenses are, what my rents are, what my if it's a property where I pay the water. So I list out every month. And my expenses, I do the store, the date, the store, the amount, the taxes, the property it was assigned to, or the YouTube channel it was assigned to for an expense, and then a note so that the CPA can figure out what they need to do with all of that. That's about as detailed as I get. I do have a video that I have recorded that I need to edit that should be coming out soon on the book that runs my business. I literally open it up, breaks down a page of how I record the data. Yeah. And City Park Properties, howdy, has a bad signal. I'm only in this hotel for 3 days, and then I should be back into a VRBO, which, if anybody wants to know the nightmare story of my VRBO when I got to Florida, I will let you know. Danielle, always love learning from you. Thank you 10,000 times over for the answers, insight. See you soon. You're awesome and super knowledgeable. Thanks, Danielle. Phil, I just did exactly that to my number 2 quad combo of reverse offer and binder strat. Said I wouldn't boot tenants or raise rates without their buy-in. Sellers chose me over 2 much higher offers. Right? That's awesome, Phil. So we should do a video on that. Email me if you're interested. If you're not, okay, I'll just do it myself. I'll have a me Phil show up and then a me, and I'll interview, and that Phil will be embarrassing. Be a lot less embarrassing if you did it. Congratulations, though. That's awesome. And that's, I take that right from the lumberjack. Find out what matters to the seller. If you could solve that problem, you're going to be the most attractive offer, even if you're not the highest offer. North Colorado Dawn. I use the ERAP system of the CARES Act for 2 of my tenants. It was great. Yep. The emergency something funds. Yeah. I used it, but I didn't do it. The tenants did. And then they both got 2 months compensated for. Angel. Howdy. Cabrita. We'll rewatch this stream. Killer content always. Thank you. At least you only have to watch this stream. There was 2 streams when I tried to get started and it wouldn't because the world hates me sometimes. Lumberjack. Phil, well done on reverse offer strategy. You crushed it. I totally agree. Julie. How do you get people to keep their yards maintained? So I don't think it's ever been a problem for me. When I have talked to investors, do you care? If it's in an HOA and you're getting a fine, pass the fine on to the tenant. If you have a small multifamily and it's impacting other tenants, then it's probably something to take action on. But I don't live there. As long as it isn't damaging, like there's not things leaning against the building where bugs or moisture can cause damage, it doesn't bother me. I know some people that care about their tenants and how much of the lawn they keep mowed. The tenants are renting. It is your property. You're the one who cares. If you really want the yard to be clean, pay to have it cleaned. But I haven't had that issue. I don't know. I don't want to say it's lucky. Set expectations with tenants. Send letters. Official letterhead, and this might cost a little bit of money, but I have an attorney on retainer for an eviction if I ever needed. If I ever had to communicate with a tenant on something that just had to happen and we had to take all emotion out, that letter would come from the attorney's office and not just from me. But I honestly, I wouldn't care. Some tenants are afraid to fix a place up because they're afraid if it looks nice, the owner might raise the rent. So I would alleviate their minds by having the binder strategy and letting them know I do area average rent based on what the area average is. I don't care what my property looks like. I keep it clean, safe, and functional. Beyond that, rents are going to be pretty close to area and just a little below. So maybe you have tenants that don't want it to look nice because they think you'll raise their rent. Lumberjack. Showing off your PhD. You're the best. Phil, learning from the best. Chester, Thanks for catching that typo. Applied financial intelligence leads to financial independence and ultimately financial freedom. I do like that if people have watched my channel enough, they understand the difference between financial and now you got me doing a verbal typo. Financial independence and financial freedom, that there is a difference. REI Stoners, howdy, what'd you miss? You missed me having spotty service and my computer not working. This is like the third version to get this live stream to work. Phil, will do. Cool. North Colorado Dawn. Landlord could sign up the tenant at the ERAP Emergency Rental Assistance Program here in Colorado. Yeah. So when it first came out, the problem was the tenant had to show hardship. So if you had a tenant who was working and couldn't show hardship, they wouldn't do it. They changed it around, I think it was April 2021, where the landlord could apply for it and sign an affidavit showing loss of rents. So the tenant didn't even have to be involved anymore, which was, I think, a good fix. Chris, howdy. If you were to add a property manager, 5 to 10%, would numbers still work? Struggling to find something that hits the numbers of a 10% cash on cash return. So if your area average is a little bit less, maybe you're going to be looking for a 7 or 8% cash on cash return, have a little easier time finding it. I generally don't add property management because I self-manage. So I wouldn't have got 10% cash on cash on a couple of my deals. They probably would have been closer to 7 or 8% with property management first year. By third or fourth year, now I could add it and it would still be, in my overall average is over 20% because rents go up, mortgages stay almost the same. So there comes like a forward projected factoring in of that expense, at least in my situation. But learn area average. If you can't find 10, if you're finding area averages are 3 or 4, then look for a 5 or 6. You're just trying to beat the area average. I wouldn't have 10 in your mind because I say 10 so much because that's been the area average that I've been shooting for. But if it got harder in my area, I would lower mine to just above the area average because I want to do a great deal. And great deals based on area, not on what in my head makes sense. North Cal. You work because you want to, not because you have to. Thanks for the great info. Thank you. RES owners, looking forward to the Tacoma Phi meetup. I'm in Florida, so I will not be at the next one. I don't know if I'll be at the next one either. I'm going to scuba dive in Florida until I'm bored. So that's either going to take a month, maybe 2, and then I'll be back. So it's going to suck. I'll miss the next live meetups. I will be in Portland for the, I want to get the name right. With my memory, I can mess that up. Northwest Action Summit, which is going to be in Portland, Oregon. And I'll go over the names really quick. Kurt McLaughlin is going to be doing flipping. He's one of the MCs. Jennifer Florent is an MC. She's going to talk about taking that first leap. Derek Sherrill is talking about house hacking with a really cool ADU strategy that he does. Bob Boschler is going to talk about hard money lending. John Robinson is going to talk about wholesaling. Kyle Robertson is going to talk about multifamily. Melissa Dorman is going to cover creative financing. And then their keynote speaker is this unattractive guy that has a lot of great information. Dion McNeeley, who's going to talk about the 6 steps to get started into real estate and break them down with actionable steps actionable items you can do at each stage, no matter which stage you're on. That's going to be May 13th and 14th in Portland, Oregon. And people can email me. My email's in the chat for any information on that. So we're technically cheating. We're not going to quite hit the 3 hours yet. I'm going to give it a few more minutes in case anybody has more questions. But I understand I'm on the East Coast, and I get now that people are staying up past 10 o'clock to do this, where it's usually 7 o'clock when I'm wrapping up a live stream. And I have the world's second most uncomfortable chair. So we'll see how long this can go. I think I made it 2 hours this time without water. And I have no vodka. So it's a terrible, terrible day. Chester, the only way to cash flow in my market is house hacking, renting by the room. Renting by the room is a good strategy. Angel, what is something you do done daily that attributed to your success in real estate? Daily, always looking at deals. You never know when the right deal is going to pop up, we talk about this often. Um, and Michael Zuber says it a lot more eloquently than I'm going to. The people who set aside 6 hours on a Saturday to look for deals have already missed all the good deals that were going to happen that week. A lot of agents will tell you the best deal comes out Thursday night because the agent wants to get the most eyes on it. But I've gotten my deals, most of them on a Tuesday or Wednesday, under contract within a couple of hours. So the people who come out on the weekends to look at deals or go look at properties are never even going to see the deals that I already have pending. So looking at deals every day is probably it. I want to say controlling expenses, but I don't. I got rid of housing as an expense, lower or reduce it with house hacking, and then buy paid off cars so you don't have a payment. Take out your biggest expenses, and then I've never had a budget. I've never looked at how much money I had coming in and going out. I would just have the streaming services go out. I watch movies all the time. I met a friend here in Florida, and he was like, "Hey, we should go watch a movie." And we named like 3 movies. I'm like, "Yeah, I've seen all those because I just go watch movies." I eat out all the time. It's cheaper for me to eat out than to store food in my refrigerator because I would end up throwing it away. Um, so I don't look at budgeting or anything. If you can't reduce or eliminate your housing or some of your transportation cost, then you're probably going to want to do a budget and do the pay yourself first. Kind of like the reason a 401k works is because the money goes in before people see it. So investing funds grow better if you can get the money to go in there before you see it, especially same thing for investing in real estate. I would say that's probably the daily stuff that I would worry about. And this is probably going to sound counterintuitive for somebody who wants to invest in real estate and make that a way to make work optional. Perform well at work. And sometimes that means changing companies. You might make more money if you change companies. Work overtime. Figure out how to increase your income. A lot of people talk about saving. I've talked about saving about 10 different times in this live stream. But have I really talked about things you can do to increase your income? Your saving is limited to what you make. What you make has no limit. So I have a video I did recently on my side hustles, how many streams of income for a millionaire. There's different ways to make money. Find ways to increase income daily. Be looking for that. Is it a promotion? Is it changing careers? Is it changing companies? Is it providing value at your job that you're not doing currently that shows them you're worth more money? I would look at that daily too. A lot of people look for that job where they can go, okay, I check in, I work, I check out, I don't think about it when I'm at home, and it's just static. It's going to stay that way. And if you're a bit older, that kind of makes sense. Our parents, my generation's parents, were rewarded if they stayed at a company long enough to get a pension. So we were raised with the verbiage of somebody talking about longevity being the thing you were rewarded for. Our generation lost the pensions and got the 401k, so a contribution-based retirement plan, which is an ultimate failure and a scam, and nobody should be investing in those. See my videos on why I hate retirement accounts. Our kids are going to be raised on Social Security is dropping away by a certain year. It's going to drop because they can only pay 78% of it. The age for retirement for Social Security is going to go from 67 to 70. It already went from 65 to 67. It's going from 67 to 70. So focusing on making more so that you can invest it, so you can own your financial story, is becoming more and more important. That's a great question, Angel. Thank you. Chester, and it's raining pretty hard here, insanely hard. It is not raining here in Florida, not today. Julie, we want pictures. Do you have an underwater video camera? I don't, but I usually get pictures because when you go on scuba trips, they usually have a camera guy that goes, and he goes around and takes photos so that when you're done, they will email you pictures for a fee, which is a cool side hustle that I should look into. It could be fun. That guy doing that with the camera never looks like he's having a bad day at work. Phil, have some good dives. Thanks for the live. Thank you. Yep, we're getting close to wrap up time unless there's questions that come up. I'm still here. Kavish, howdy. Have you considered any big multifamily like 5+ units? The commercial lending is rough with 30 to 40% down. Have you worked with credit unions like the couple you had on as a guest? I have not. What stops me from going over 4 units is partially the down payment. As I'm saving the down payment, I might look at them, right? So I'm getting there. I could sell or refinance a house to have the money to buy a larger multifamily place too, because I have the one paid off property and I have a ton of equity in the other properties. It's not so much the down payment as it is the loan structure. I do not ever want to own a loan that has a loan reevaluation period. None of us have a crystal ball that's good enough to know what's going to happen to interest rates in 5 or 7 years when they want to take that 1 year and look at your portfolio. And if you're performing, they'll renew your rate at whatever the current rates are. And if you're not performing well enough, they can tell you either need to cut us a big check to create a bigger gap, or you need to sell or refinance. And nobody will refinance you because you're not performing well. I don't want any of that stress or drama in my life. Even Matt, the lumberjack landlord, has reduced the number of those types of loans he has in his portfolio. And he said in the next few years, he might even focus on taking care of those loans, either refinancing or paying them off. So I don't want that stress. Convoy Mortgage, that is talking about their 40-year loan product, is fixed rate, 10 years interest only, then 30 years regular amortized loan. And I believe, I need to verify this, that they'll do it on up to 29 units. If that's the case, and it's a true 40-year fixed rate, no loan reevaluation period, no adjustable rate mortgage, then I'm going to start looking at the number of units that my down payment makes sense for. I also like to have 4 units or less. So I wouldn't have wanted to start with this strategy if I had the option, because I like that my portfolio is spread out. The properties, all but 2, are more than 10 miles apart from each other. And so they don't draw tenants from the same sources. So if I have a 10 or 12 or a 16 unit apartment complex, now all of those tenants are going to come from one area, which can be impacted by something that changes in that area. But I have the portfolio that's large enough to handle that. So now it makes sense for me to do that. I don't know that I would have started, even if I could have started with fixed rate debt like that in the beginning. It wouldn't have fit my strategy as well. So debt structure, so far, is the main barrier. And howdy, Kavish. Chester, the biggest focus for newer investors seems to be get to the income snowball while avoiding life creep. That's pretty much the equation. The thing that I like that you left out of there is as quick as possible. A lot of the new investors want to get to the income snowball while avoiding life creep, but now, like today. It happens, but not today. It's get rich quick doesn't work, but get wealthy for sure takes time. Yeah. Kavish, great point. Thank you. Lumberjack, credit unions largely only do residential. They can do creative stuff, but it's usually residential. Yeah. I haven't either. Lumberjack landlord, I did see it tonight, didn't read yet. Dealing with flooded sewer line. Rather be reading your email. Nice. Okay, so I guess we are about to hit the 3-hour mark. So somebody come up with a 2-minute question. Challenged. Dawn, ouch. Yep, I agree. CJ Ukeel, howdy. Did you use your reserves for your first deals, the 10%, as your personal emergency fund as well? Or did you keep a separate emergency fund? I'm eager to get my first investment property and cautious. I did use it in the beginning, and I would use it now. It's a reserve for a reason. So Mike and Matt talk about they've got a reserve account that is their scorched earth. They don't touch it unless they absolutely have to. I would go into my reserves if I need to because I'm still working and I still have 6-figure cash flow from the rentals. There was a time where I bought a 4-plex, and I wanted to have $30,000 in reserve, and the lender wanted me to have, I think it was like 24,000 in reserve. So whatever it was 3 months PITI, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance for all of my properties in an account. I dropped all the way down to $200 in my checking account and savings account total. To my name, I had $200. So when I was first starting, in my first 5 years, I would have lost a week's sleep. I would have had more bags under the bags under the bags of eyes. I would have been a stress ball the whole time. I did it with confidence and knowledge that I was going to do it. I had a credit card with $17,000 that hadn't been touched. I had a retirement account with about 80 something thousand dollars in there, and lenders will consider 50% of a retirement account as a reserve without you having to touch it, tap it, or take it out. You just have to prove it's in there, and it has to be seasoned. So it has to be in there for more than 3 months. So that was my reserve for the lender. But on my accounts, reserve and everything dropped to 200 because I'm past the income snowball. I probably wouldn't do it again. I don't have the retirement account now to do it because COVID in 2020, I was able to take all that money out and put it to work into a triplex without paying a 10% penalty. So the only thing good that happened to me through COVID. So I don't have that reserve. And I wouldn't count a credit card as a reserve or a line of credit because those can disappear when lending fears get bad. Those are going to be the first things that go. So I had $200 to my name, but I closed on January 6th. So I got the rents for the fourplex for January. I had a job and I had cash flow from, at the time, 7 other rental units. Then I got the rents from February from the fourplex because your mortgage isn't due until the first after a complete month of when you close. So I didn't pay a mortgage for January or February. So I paid March 1st for my mortgage on the fourplex, but collected almost 2 full months. In 2 months, I had over $10,000 in cash again. And then by the third or fourth month, I hit over the 30,000 that I wanted to be. So I knew the math. I knew there were tenants in place. I had a credit card. I had a retirement account. I could have tapped if I needed to. So there are times I've done that. I wouldn't recommend that in the beginning, especially when you don't have confidence in your ability to get the return you're expecting. So hopefully that answered that question. Kavish, I agree. Jason C. Boxers or briefs? Boxer briefs. Do a lot of groundwork with law enforcement to practice defensive tactics, and you want tight conforming clothes, kind of. Yeah, so there you go. It's off topic question. Landlord, lumberjack. Lumberjack, landlord. We are breaking the 3 hour, so words are going to get harder and harder. Dawn, so true. And tenants still complaining because I put them up in a hotel. Ouch. That's crazy. I put up a tenant for 60 days while rebuilding their kitchen from a leaking roof. Yep. I put a tenant in a hotel for 4 days one time while there was a septic system being worked on. I think that's the only time I've had to do that. I was happy to do it because I say I did it, but money is being set aside for repairs, maintenance, and vacancy. And that money covered the septic problem and it covered the hotel cost. So the tenants paid for the issues. Lumberjack landlord says it's brutal. Dawn, they just moved out March 1st of this year. Jason C, great choice. Nice. There was our 2-minute question that took us over the 3 hours. I appreciate it. Dion hit the nail on the head. Best of both worlds. Nice. Dawn. Dion, perfect reason to have reserves. I rebuilt the kitchen, then got the insurance check. Exactly. So Matt's probably doing the same thing. I think he said it too. Thank God the insurance company reimbursed me. This is what you said, Dawn. So right. So you probably can pay for it. Sometimes you can have a contractor work with insurance company and get to pay direct, but a lot of times it's easier to just be reimbursed. Dawn. There we go. Jason. CJ, thank you. Angel R. Hit the like button, guys. Don't be just takers. Thanks. And Eric Fung, howdy. Okay. I think we're going to wrap that up for the week. I, again, Apologize for the slow internet connection. Next week, I will be back into a VRBO. So I'm going to wrap up with a 2-minute version of what happened with VRBO. I come to Florida. I have VRBO lined up. I've had it lined up for 3 weeks. I'm trying not to tell everybody that I'm going to Florida until I get here because I wanted a solo scuba trip, and it's hard to go solo scuba trip when you know a bunch of 5 people, and all of a sudden you'll have a bunch of scuba trip people. The owner took the money from VRBO, but did not tell his homeowners association that he had a tenant in place. And their HOA is okay with short-term rentals, but you have to give, I think it's 30-day notice, and the owner has to pay the association for a background check on the possible tenant. So he didn't do any of that. And this is like his 4th time doing that. So the HOA basically came and evicted me the day I was moving in to my VRBO that I have reserved for. I was going to do at least a month here, so I have 38 days here, and then I was going to decide if I want to renew or stay somewhere else. So VRBO put me in a hotel, and they're finding me another place to stay. So that's why I had spotty internet service here today, which sucks. So I'm hoping that the place that I find has good internet, because I'm going to continue to do live streams and continue to make videos here when I'm not in a wetsuit and in the water. Chester, I'm using a worst case scenario of 9% in reserves in your acquisition model. So anything can crash. Cash flows now should yield way better cash flow of 5.5 or 6%. Yeah, that's a good number to go with. Don, thank you, Dion. Have a great vacation. Thanks, Don. Christoph, howdy. Thank you. My brother does it all the time. Chester, what rates do you use for your acquisition model? Buy box. So rates. So you're using 9%. Oh, interest rates. I was using 4.8 up until about a week ago, and because I'm still doing conventional in my name, less than 10 mortgages. I'm not at commercial yet. I don't have to do DSCR. I don't have to do non-QM. So going forward, I'm going to be using 6. And it's probably going to go higher in the next couple of weeks. So that will, I think it's going to impact and make properties sit on the market longer, and they will stop going up so high. They'll kind of plateau. And at some point, rents will make those numbers make sense. And I totally get when we're starting out investing, the goal is to get the next property. My goal is to get the right property. And when the right property shows up, I'll be excited that it does. And until then, I'm actually in no hurry. And that is a hard amount of patience to develop. I didn't have it in the first few years. The first few years, I was frustrated because saving the down payment took me so long. And then the frustration became finding a place to put the money to work. And now the frustration has kind of gone away because financial independence makes life a lot more interesting. Tell me you want a spot on the Keys. Kavish, howdy. No, I'm up in Cape Coral. I wanted to come and see Matsky Finance. I've got some friends that live here in Cape Coral. And the VRBO in Cape Coral is a third the price of a month in the Keys. So I'm financially independent. I'm not financially free. Financial freedom is when you don't have to look at price tags. Independent is when you don't have to work. Still work because I love what I do, but I don't have to. So I'm independent. That doesn't mean I have stupid money. So I still look at prices when this is the first time I've actually done short-term rental somewhere. Normally, me and my brother travel, and we just go and figure it out when we get there. But I might go to the Keys if I decide to take a couple days during the week when there's less traffic there. Go down and just do a hotel for a couple days and do some jet ski. But that'll be my time down in the Keys. Interest rates. Yeah. Tell them you want a spot on the Keys. Oh, I should tell VRBO I want a spot on the Keys. Oh, I'm sure that would go over for the same price. Oh, they'd find me a place on the Keys. I would just be paying the new price. Yeah. Scott, thank you. Lumberjack landlord, I can't ever scuba with you. Too worried I'd get harpooned. Exactly. Um, I haven't. This will be my first time scubaing in waters with alligators, so that'll be interesting. Washington, the waters are cold. You don't have a lot of visibility. I love scuba diving in Colombia was good. It wasn't my favorite. Scuba diving in Thailand on the islands was amazing. I have images of me swimming next to a 35-foot whale shark, where when the whale moves, the whole basically water that I am in moves. Um, that was awesome. Uh, Pallavi, thank you. Yeah, everybody, great questions. Have a good night. Lumberjack, stay safe. Sean, okay. Belly will make me float down. All right, you guys have a good evening. We're going to call it there. Um, I appreciate everybody that came by. Sorry about how this live stream started. Next week will go a lot smoother. And Michael, howdy. Simolan Islands. I'm actually don't know where those are, so I'll have to check them out. And in Thailand, it was the island of Koh Tao, which I had a great time at. Khao Phanong was a little more um, weirdly like 10 times as expensive, and they're not that far apart. Um, yeah, get an underwater camera. I should. They have they have scuba sets where you can actually talk underwater. I can do a live stream while scubaing. I don't know that that's going to happen though. All right, you guys. Until my next video. Thanks for coming to my Dion Talk.